The boy used the simplest draw and slash move yet, he shocked every teacher present, because it was a level of power a student shouldn't possess, even though it looked like Lonan only struck once. In reality, it was 3 hits. He deliberately slowed down the final blow, just so the teachers could see. Well, it was that exact move that sent Nabaros into a rage, while Lonan said expressionlessly, "Master, you're scaring me," Nabaros demanded. "Who taught you that sword technique?" Lonan replied, confused. "What are you talking about? No one taught me anything." So Nabaros changed her question. "Did you see my movements just now?" Lonan said, "Yes, I saw them. You're remarkable. You drew your sword and landed 3 strikes in a split second." Nabaros calmed down a bit and said, "Yes, just like you showed." Then she suddenly changed her tone. "You arrogant brat. You slowed down the last strike on purpose, so we could see it clearly, didn't you?" Lonan was stunned. He only slowed the 3rd strike to reduce the power so no one would get hurt. It wasn't out of disrespect, but facing Nabaros's fury, his explanation seemed pointless. The headmaster stayed silent, awkwardly looking away, while the other 2, dumbfounded, said, "As teachers, shouldn't we have noticed something?" A moment later, Nabaros sheathed her sword and slowly returned to her seat. She said, "I will teach you personally from now on." Back in her place, her emotions were still reeling. The headmaster beside her looked at the furious Nabaros and pondered those words, "teach personally." The headmaster understood. Nabaros had already decided to take this child as her pupil. He turned to Lonan and said, "You passed, but we still have one more question for you. Why did you come to the Royal Academy?" Hearing that name, Lonan lowered his head as memories flooded his mind. The boy had poured every ounce of his strength into killing what he believed was the strongest 4-winged giant. He thought it would all be over. But unexpectedly, an 8-winged giant, even more powerful, appeared in the sky. The giant's limit wasn't 4 wings, it was 8. At that moment, the boy was ready to fight to the death. But another survivor didn't agree with his plan. Instead of that, she strangely embraced the boy. Actually, 2.5 years earlier, 3 giants had suddenly invaded the empire, destroying more than half of its territory in no time. It wasn't until Lonan's army joined the fray that they were able to barely hold back the giants. But the cost was heavy. The entire army was nearly wiped out, leaving only Lonan critically injured. He watched the battlefield with a faint sadness, but at that moment a voice rang out. "It's been a long time since I've seen a human this strong." Turning his head, Lonan discovered the voice was coming from the dead giant. Infuriated, he stepped on its face and said, "Half the empire is a graveyard because of you. Why aren't you dead yet? You want to know how your 2 friends died? One was roasted by a red dragon. The other was sealed away forever by a wizard. Do you understand now, you cursed creature?" He hoped these words would provoke the giant, but it replied, indifferently, "The children of the stars share their senses. I know how they died, but they will return soon. And there are no more humans, as strong as you left on Earth." As soon as it finished speaking, Lonan severed its head in one blow, saying, "Just die already. Stop talking nonsense." After doing all that, Lonan walked across the battlefield, stopping only when he saw the body of his old friend. Then he knelt down and said, "Why didn't you run? When I told you to, why were you so foolish? Sacrificing your life for some so-called discipline." While Lonan was drowning in grief, he thought he heard a cry for help. Dragging his battered body, he followed the sound. It was Grand Commander Andachan. She was still alive. Lonan felt a bit relieved, but looking closely, the Grand Commander's situation didn't look any better. She had lost an arm. Yet she didn't care about that. Instead, she was worried about whether the giant was dead. Lonan said, "Yes, I killed it myself." After hearing his answer, she seemed relieved, tears streaming down uncontrollably. "Thank you." Lonan took the chance to make a request. "Since you're so grateful, could you give these soldiers a decent burial? Because before, their bodies were just tossed away, but it's all over now. It was time to handle things properly." After speaking, Lonan began to cough violently. Seeing the blood on his hand, he told the Grand Commander that he could die at any moment. Andachan asked him, "If you could live, what would you want to do?" A flicker of light appeared in Lonan's eyes. He said, "I'd probably go study at an academy. It was my late sister's wish, but there's no hope for that now." "Don't talk like that. The rescue team will be here soon." But just then the sky suddenly brightened. A ray of dawn broke through, but they stared in terror at an 8-winged giant appearing with countless followers. In that moment, Andachan fell into deep despair. She said, "I've saved this world 3 times. This time there really is no way out." But Lonan drew his sword by her side. Determined, he shouted to her, "Grand Commander, comrade, what are you doing? Hurry, launch me up there with your psychic power. My sword can't reach them from here. I'm gonna teach those bastards a lesson." Andachan was stunned. He still wanted to fight even in this state. What a determined man. Then she kissed him and spat a pearl into his mouth. Ando-chan said, "This is a pearl that can reverse time 4 times. I've already used it 3 times. That's how I went from being a tailor to a Grand Commander. I'm giving you the final use. And when you see me again, please, convince me to be a tailor again." As she finished speaking, a flash of light appeared. When Lonen opened his eyes, he was back in his village from 10 years ago. Seeing the familiar scene before him, he was stunned. "Am I dreaming?" he thought. Then he banged his head against a nearby tree, hoping to wake up shortly after. Lonen accepted reality. The Grand Commander's ambition was truly massive, expecting him to face the giants alone. What could he do? After thinking it over, Lonen had an idea. He grabbed a branch and ran toward the village entrance. But on the way, some bullies caught his attention. They had hung a boy upside down. Looking closely, they hadn't used a rope. It was magic. Lonen couldn't believe it, discovering telekinesis magic, which was so rare in this rural village. The yellow-haired ringleader violently demanded money from the boy. The boy said, "I gave all the money to my mom for her medicine. I don't have any right now." The blonde boy was furious and immediately ordered the girl to hang him higher using magic. But the girl, Assam, refused. The atmosphere became tense. At that moment, Lonen whacked Assam on the head with a stick and said, "Stop, you're going to kill him." The boy fell to the other side. Meanwhile, the blonde boy grew even more enraged. He said, "What are you doing?" "She only stopped because you told her to," but Lonen ignored him, looked at Assam and said, "Forget him. Tell me where you learned magic." Assam said, "From a magic book I bought at a store." Lonen was flabbergasted. She was this gifted from just a cheap magic book. Lonen's gut told him that this person would be very useful in the future war against the giants. But at that moment he heard the sound of a sword being drawn. Lonen turned his head. The blonde boy had charged at him, with sword in hand, screaming, "How dare you ignore me!" Even though the blonde boy was strong, his sword stance was all wrong. Lonen saw through it instantly and sidestepped, having evaded him so easily. The blonde-haired boy felt anxious but pretended to be calm and said, "You're just really lucky." Lonen nodded and said, "Yeah, he was indeed lucky today." Seeing that, Lonen didn't fight back. The yellow-haired boy became more aggressive. He said, "Get on your knees and beg, and I might forgive you, but I'm still cutting off one of your arms. Of course I'll take real good care of your sister. Every time I see her beautiful body I want." Before he could finish, the blonde boy's ear was sliced off. Lonen was furious. His sister was his only weakness. He wouldn't let anyone defile her. This scene terrified the other thugs. He had managed to use a tree branch like a sword. Seeing this, Lonen took the opportunity to make them give the boy his money back. The bullies didn't dare refuse. They returned all the stolen money to the boy, then fled. Meanwhile, Lonen made an arrangement with Assam. They would meet right here at 2:30 in the morning, 4 days from now, because they had something very important to do. After giving those instructions, Lonen rushed home but hesitated at the door. So many questions were tormenting him. Should I apologize for leaving without saying goodbye? Tell her how much I missed her. Ask her if she's doing okay? But when he finally saw his sister, Lonen only said, "I'm back," and brought her his sister's favorite flowers. His sister was overjoyed to receive them. She said, "I didn't expect flowers from my cold brother. Is there enough to eat? Do you want me to make more?" Seeing the 13 dishes and the soup, a stunned Lonen waved his hands to say no. Changing the subject, he asked how old his sister was. She replied, "I'm 22 this year." This meant there were 10 years left before the giants' invasion. His sister asked, "Why do you ask?" She quickly stepped closer to feel his forehead and said, "You don't seem to have a fever." Ben grabbed his sister's hand, then said, "No, I was thinking of going to study at an academy." Hearing this, his sister was overjoyed. Then she hopped aside and rummaged through boxes and drawers. Shortly after, she pulled out a bucket. It was filled with gold coins. Lonen couldn't believe it. He said, "How did you get all this?" His sister, with her hands on her hips, said, "I've been saving up for 2.5 years, waiting for you to say that." But Lonen replied, "It's nowhere near enough." Because Lonen wanted to get into the best institution in the world, the Phillips Royal Academy. They had the most outstanding professors and the strongest financial backing. Plus, the academy had produced 3 world-class talents: Grand Commander, Ando-chan the Sword, Saint Shulafan, and the Witch. So to defeat the giants, this was Lonen's only choice. 4 days later, Lonen went to the meeting spot he'd arranged with Assam. The first thing Lonen did was put down his backpack, then said, "All right, control me. Use telekinesis to lift me as high as possible." Lonen wanted to test her magical power, but Assam was hesitant. She said, "I can't do that." "It's too dangerous," Lonen said. "It's fine, I bought insurance." Hearing that Assam's heart was finally at ease, so Assam began to recite a spell. When the magic activated, an invisible hand lifted Lonan high up. The height even exceeded what Lonan had imagined. Despite its instability, telekinesis was crucial for fighting flying giants, and this type of magic was extremely rare. Lonan gave a satisfied smile and thought, she's mine. Meanwhile, Assam began to tremble. She said, "Can I put you down now?" But the next second, Lonan brandished his sword and spun it to slice through the magic, then landed safely. Assam exclaimed in shock, "What did you just do?" "Slice through magic," Lonan tapped her lightly and said, "Nothing, just some acrobatics." In truth, this question had long haunted Lonan. He hadn't known his sword was special. It could cut through magic, and even kill giants. But that could wait. There were more urgent things to do. Lonan tossed the bag to Assam. "Let's go. We need to finish before the moon goes down. After this, we can become students at Phillips Academy." Assam was stunned. "Did I hear that right, Phillips?" "That's a place for the elite. You're powerful. Swordsmanship might get you in, but I'm useless." "I probably can't go there, right?" Lonan told her, "I know you think you're stupid. Shy and a total crybaby, but that's okay. You can start changing right now. Otherwise, you'll just waste your life hanging out with those thugs." At these words, Assam's face turned red. It was the first time anyone had cared so much about her future, so she quickly agreed. Lonan flashed a mischievous smile. His plan had worked. Shortly after they arrived at the goblin hideout, even though they were all asleep, it was still extremely dangerous. Lonan's target was the treasure the goblins had hoarded. Lonan said, "Let's get started. Use telekinesis to take everything." Hearing this, Assam was instantly terrified. She saw the goblins' jacked physiques and said, "If they wake up, we're dead. Why don't we go back and think about it?" But Lonan pulled her aside and said, "To get into the Phillips Royal Academy, you need two things: high tuition and plenty of combat experience. So this kills two birds with one stone. Unless you've got a better idea in that head of yours." "I don't." Lonan said, "All right then, let's get started." After speaking, Lonan opened his bag and said, "Fill it up." Assam had no choice but to comply. As the magic activated, the goblins' treasures gradually fell into the bag. To avoid waking them, Assam had to use all her strength to control her magic. Fortunately, everything went smoothly. She quickly filled 2 bags. A happy Lonan patted Assam on the head. "I knew you could do it." But even he hadn't been entirely confident. He didn't expect Assam to adapt so quickly. It seemed he'd found a good sidekick. After a moment, the two packed up their things. They were just about to leave when a group of people rushed toward them with piercing screams. Lonan felt that something was seriously wrong. In the middle of the night, some psycho. Did they just escape from a mental hospital? Meanwhile, the green-haired goblin was woken up. The first thing he did, upon waking, was check the treasure chest. The box was empty. The green-haired goblin quickly woke the others and called an emergency meeting. They discussed where the treasure had gone, but one of the goblins offered a different opinion. He looked at Lonan and Assam and said, "Could they be the ones who stole it?" Realizing this, the goblins immediately pounced on them. Seeing this, terrified Assam collapsed to the ground. She said, "Shouldn't we just give their stuff back and apologize?" But Lonan drew his sword and said, "What about the tuition then? Do you have a better way?" The moment a situation required thinking, Assam was lost. She said no. Meanwhile, Lonan looked at the sword in his hand. It was made of cheap steel. Given how tough goblin bodies were, the sword would probably break after 15 hits. But there were more than 30 goblins here. Still, it would be enough. Lonan flashed a smile and then he charged at the goblins. Almost instantly, the last goblin also died by his sword. Assam was floored. Lonan killed 3 with one swing, then he vanished for a split second, and suddenly all the goblins were dead. Assam couldn't help but gulp. Had he already become this strong? Right then, Lonan said, "Don't just daydream, grab the bags. Let's head back." Shortly after they returned. What he thought would be an easy job turned out to be quite difficult. Lonan stretched his aching body. It was probably because he was still growing. He'd have to step up his physical training once he got back. But at that moment, Assam brought up the high-pitched scream. She asked, "What was that noise anyway?" Lonan shook his head and said, "No idea. If I run into them, I'll wring their necks." Meanwhile, a bow and arrow were silently aiming at Assam from behind, but Lonan blocked them easily. On the other side, the man who had fired the arrow started apologizing even though his face showed no remorse. It turned out that as soon as Lonan and Assam found the treasure, these 2 men had witnessed it and were harboring bad intentions. Seeing their assassination attempt fail, they decided to try another approach. Kids generally have their guard down around strangers. They approached and said, "Sorry, kids. I heard a noise and thought you were goblins, little guys. Lonen, furious, snapped the arrow in two. I've been around the block more than you two. A moment later, the man reached out his hand to apologize, but his eyes were fixed on Lonen's bag. Lonen said, you couldn't hide your greedy eyes if you tried. Your acting is terrible. The man fell silent for a moment after hearing that, but seeing only a child, he didn't find him threatening. He glanced at his partner and kept walking toward Lonen, still wearing that forced smile. But he had discreetly moved his hand behind his back, grabbing the dagger at his belt. He said, I should introduce myself. We are the Caliporo. As he spoke, he suddenly swung his knife at Lonen. Caliporo thought he had him, but then Lonen appeared casually, knocking the man out. He now remembered that they were just scum. Right at that moment, while Lonen was distracted, the yellow-haired man also charged, but Assam noticed him. Assam used telekinesis and directly restrained the yellow-haired man. Seeing this, Lonen gave Assam her first compliment of the day, nice job. Then, he took the sword from the yellow-haired man's hand and unleashed a 7-star luminous slash. 3, 2, 1. When the countdown finished, the yellow-haired man fell apart into 15 pieces. This scene terrified Assam. She said, Lonen, you really killed him. Lonen said with a determined look, I'm not letting anyone live who tried to kill me. Besides, they're a vile group. They poach, kidnap, and sell organs. If I hadn't been here by the time they found you, the grass on your grave would already be knee-high. But then a bag behind them suddenly jumped, surprising them both. Could it be an animal they poached? With those words, Lonen untied the rope in a flash. Something flew out. Looking closer, it was a bluebird. How pretty, Sam exclaimed. It was the first time she had ever seen a bird that color. But Lonen's attention wasn't on its color, but on its legs, because it was wearing shackles that sealed away power. Aren't those for powerful mythical beasts? What celestial law could this bird have possibly broken? At that moment, the bird let out a greeting, mihi mihi. Sam was so startled she jumped. It talks, Lonen said with a grimace. You idiot. That's long-distance communication magic. If I'm not mistaken, that's the bluebird's owner. On the other side, a strange figure was speaking with a harsh voice from within a magic circle. He said, That's right, I'm from the Research Institute for Mythical Beasts. My bluebird went missing yesterday, and I haven't been able to reach it. By the way, who are you? Lonen, holding back Assam, as she tried to run away, said, We're just concerned citizens. Your bird was kidnapped and we saved it. After speaking, he cut the bird's shackles in a single stroke, then said, Go back to your father. This act immediately filled the bluebird with gratitude. Then it stuck its butt right in his face. Lonen was stunned. Was this its way of saying thanks? Luckily, the bird's master quickly explained, The blue bird wants you to pluck one of its feathers. A bluebird's feather will always point back toward the bird itself. It probably wants to see you again. When Lonen plucked the feather, the bluebird flew off and vanished without a trace. Lonen wondered, Is it really sure it wants to see me again? The next day, the two took the treasure to the market to sell it for gold coins. The merchant examined a necklace for a long time and offered 20 gold coins. Deal, Lonen accepted happily. Finally, someone who knew its real value. The memory of that other merchant who claimed the necklace was worth at most 5 gold coins still made Lonen angry, but he had finally met someone competent. Then Lonen sold all the treasures he had brought. Meanwhile, Lonen dug into his pocket and pulled out a large purple object. The blue bird had left it behind when it flew off. At first, he thought it was droppings, but it was hard enough to break stones. Lonen's instinct told him this thing was really special. The merchant agreed. The merchant said, Whoa, this color, this texture, could it be? An excited Lonen asked, What is it? The merchant said, Bird poop. Lonen was left speechless. The merchant could only laugh awkwardly and say, Actually, I'm not really an expert either. Lonen sighed and put it back in his pocket, planning to find an expert to appraise it one day. Assam looked at him with a grin and said, It really is just hardened crap. Changing the subject, Lonen asked the merchant, Do you have any books on the Phillips Royal Academy? We want to enroll, but we don't know much about it. The merchant said, Oh, right, my daughter, Maria, is also getting ready to go. You can talk with her. Here she comes. Lonen was shocked. He knew that name all too well. But what appeared was a blonde woman. Lonen walked up and asked, Are you really Maria? Maria replied, Yeah, what's up? Lonen was floored because the Maria from his past life was completely different. So Lonen leaned into her ear and said, Let me ask you something. You're a man, right? Maria was stunned. She looked down at her curvaceous figure. Was this guy crazy or blind? Lonan's eyes lingered on Maria. No way. You don't look like a man. Maybe your dad has an illegitimate son. As soon as he said that, Maria slapped him. Maria said, "Shut up! What kind of nonsense is that?" But that slap didn't cause Lonan pain, but rather an intense sense of familiarity. Now he confirmed that this person was indeed Count Maria, Senda from 10 years ago. Before his time travel, Count Maria had been an army supplier, noble by status but easy to talk to, often drinking with the soldiers. And every time Lonan discussed men's talk with other soldiers, Maria would usually get angry and follow it up with a slap. Lonan was very curious and wanted to ask why, but he never had the chance to see Maria again. She had already died during the giant invasion war. But the mystery that had plagued Lonan for so long was finally revealed. The Count was a girl. This scene made Maria even angrier. "You're still laughing." She ran up to slap him again, but Lonan retorted with a shove. "That's enough. I let you hit me once because I was wrong, but you're not hitting me a second time." At those words, Maria's eyes turned fierce. She headbutted Lonan and said, "What if I insist on hitting you again?" After that, the two actually started brawling, neither wanting to back down. This scene left the two onlookers speechless. They rushed in to stop them. That evening, they gathered in a small inn. Assam was shocked to see the two people who just wanted to kill each other now sitting calmly together. They looked like they'd been friends for a long time. Meanwhile, Lonan laid out 3 swords and a magic wand, taken from the goblins. He said, "Check if there's any problem with these." Maria picked up a sword and examined it carefully. She said, 3 swords and a wand. Isn't it a pain to carry it all?" Lonan said, "No choice. I carry them just in case." Because in his past life, Lonan's swordsmanship was very brutal. He'd break a sword almost every week. Lonan asked, "How are these items?" Maria thought for a moment and said, "They're all pretty good, especially this black iron sword. The material is exceptionally sturdy." Then Maria looked at the wand and found it had a rare magic stone. She said to Assam, "Is this little cutie a rare mage? What kind of magic do you use, sweetie?" Assam was thrilled to hear that. She said, "Yes." Then she looked down and said, "I only know telekinesis." Maria reacted quickly. "Telekinesis? You're incredible. If you pass, you'll get a full scholarship." Assam asked in disbelief. "Really?" Then Maria changed the subject. "So for the next question, what combat technique can you demonstrate during the practical exam?" Lonan was stunned. Demonstrating techniques, he had never heard of anything like that. To get into the Phillips Royal Academy, you have to pass both theory and practical exams. The practical exam requires you to demonstrate combat techniques and impress the professors. Most nobles show off their family's secret techniques, while common warriors use magic. Hearing this, Lonan stopped immediately. "Maria, wait. I'm a swordsman. Isn't it enough to be good? With a sword, do swordsmen have to use magic too?" Maria was stunned and said, "Any student wanting to enter Phillips must use magic. That's the most basic requirement." "What's with that look on your face? Don't tell me you can't even feel a drop of magic energy." Lonan was confused. Feeling magic energy? Was it similar to using aura? This completely baffled Maria. This guy was like a total no-show trying to get into an Ivy League school. "Keep dreaming. Get out of here right now," she said, then nonchalantly grabbed a sword from the table. She said, "Lend me your sword." Lonan asked, "What if it breaks?" Maria replied, "I'll pay you triple." "Stop arguing. Come outside with me. I'm giving you a crash course. Magic energy is the root of natural power, existing in every corner of the world. But you have to be able to feel it, to use it and apply it to different parts of the body. The resulting power is called magic. It often takes a year to understand, but..." Lonan still didn't get it. He asked, "Isn't aura also magic power?" Maria said, "No, aura is way more powerful than magic power. Even geniuses need at least 10 years to master it. And once activated, you get a power more terrifying than magic. That's the big difference." That's enough explaining. After speaking, Maria rushed at Lonan so fast. "It's magic. The strength boost is huge," but Lonan parried the attack by instinct. Then with a shove, he pushed Maria back. Maria was also stunned. She had put all her magic into the sword. Why was she the one pushed back? Who exactly was this guy? Soon they exchanged a few more sword strikes, but Lonan didn't want to fight anymore. His arms were aching from the impacts. He simply activated his aura and struck downward, deliberately missing his target. Maria took the opportunity to back off and said, "You're really something." Lonan turned around and replied, "You too, but you need to work on your balance more." As he spoke, he sheathed his sword and prepared to leave. Maria asked, "Where are you going?" Maria wasn't satisfied. She raised her sword and said, "You don't actually think you won, do you, Lonan?" Said calmly, "Remember what you said. Triple compensation if it gets damaged." The next second, Maria's sword shattered completely. When did that even happen? At that moment, Assam, who was acting as referee, walked over and touched her. Her expression suggested she wasn't surprised at all by the outcome of the fight. She said, "You did well enough." With that, she quickly ran toward Lonan, leaving a confused Maria behind. Maria was still wondering, what exactly is he? The next day, Lonan not only received enough gold to buy 3 swords, but also 2 bags of books. Lonan asked, "What's all this, Maria?" Said, "The exam is in a month." "Don't you need them?" asked Lonan. "But why are you doing this? Merchants are usually driven by profit." Then he drew his sword and said, "If you're trying to kill me," Maria laughed out loud. "Free, totally free? I just hope we all pass the exam." So Lonan sheathed his sword and said, "Fine, I accept." A little later, Maria said goodbye to Lonan. "After helping you so much, if you fail, I'll kill you." Lonan smiled and said, "Sure, worry about yourself. See you in the capital on exam day." After saying goodbye, Lonan looked at his hand. Over the next month, he would have to step up his physical training because this body was currently too weak. Shortly after, Lonan returned home. From then on, he ate 8 meals a day, bowls of rice at every meal, only stopping when his stomach was completely full. This delighted his sister. Her brother had finally come to his senses. And at night, Lonan would go near the village to hunt monsters. In his spare time, he studied the materials. Lonan was quite puzzled. Why do I need to learn table manners for the exam? Despite that, he still read through all the documents Maria had given him. And so a month passed quickly. Lonan and Assam arrived at Phillips for the festival. Seeing the magnificent academy that looked like a palace, Assam was in awe. She stared blankly and, with her mouth full of praise, Lonan said, "Assam, what are you doing? You're acting like a total country bumpkin." Assam replied, "I'm sorry, Lonan." Assam looked at Lonan and was amazed. In just 1 month, he seemed to have grown stronger. But Lonan gave her a light punch, saying, "Stop daydreaming, let's go. He should be here too. He's about the same age as me, the Sword Saint Julin, honored as the strongest. Maybe I'll run into him during the test." Just then, Assam suddenly mentioned the blue bird. Lonan pulled out the feather that could locate the blue bird, but against all expectations it pointed straight up at the sky, leaving Lonan stunned. But he quickly identified the roof of the tallest school building. On the other side, Marin was about to open the window for some fresh air. Suddenly a face appeared before him. He was immediately terrified, because he was on the 30th floor, way up at the top. As Lonan and his companion burst in, Marin trembled while holding the bluebird. He said, "What do you want? Don't even think about hurting it." Only when Lonan pulled out the feather did Marin's anxious heart finally settle. He asked, "Are you the heroes who are saving it?" After learning the truth, Marin quickly apologized. "I'm so sorry for making a fool of myself in front of you two." Lonan said, "It's fine. If anyone's to blame, it's entirely this girl's fault. She used telepathy to send us here." Assam pinched him. She protested, "You're the one who told me to teleport us here." Surprisingly, the bird's owner was a lion man and a professor at Phillips Academy. After hearing this, Marin said, awkwardly, "I didn't expect our heroes to be new students. If I'd known, sooner I could have written you a letter of recommendation. But it's too late now. If you fail, I could—" Lonan interrupted him. "That's kind, but that's not why we're here." Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out the bird droppings. Marin asked, "What's this?" Lonan said, "This is what your blue bird left in my hand." Marin took the droppings and began to examine them, his expression becoming increasingly tense. Lonan asked, "Isn't it just ordinary bird poop?" "Why the long face?" Marin said. "This is a legendary dream bird. This is its egg, not just any egg. If it absorbs the magic of the fire tribe, it could hatch into an immortal phoenix. If placed in a monster's nest, it could manifest in the form of that monster." Marin continued, horrified. "And now I see countless types of magic power within this egg. Different magic energies, intertwining and chasing each other." After listening to him, Lonan was stunned, as expected of a professor. He could assign so much meaning to an egg. Meanwhile, Marin became serious and said, "This egg must remain in your care. Though extremely valuable, and it only lays one in its lifetime, it chose to place it in your hands, and we must respect that." Hearing this, the bluebird danced with joy as if approving of Marin's words. Lonan took back the egg and said, "I have no objections. I also want to know what's inside it." Then Lonan got up to leave, but Marin stopped him. The bluebird chirped, seeming to remind them of something. A moment later, Marin pulled out a scroll and said, "This is for you. It'll help with the hatching." Time flew by, until the start of the exam. Lonan complained to Maria. We've been waiting for so long, and it's still not my turn, Maria replied. Exams are always like this, but if our little sweetheart were here, it wouldn't be so boring, said Lonan. She's a mage taking a test elsewhere. That's when the examiner called Lonan's number. He stood up to leave. Maria said, don't be nervous. Do what I told you. If you don't pass, don't come back. Lonan gave a wave and said, I know. Thanks for the blessing. Then he turned his head with a determined look and said, I'll be right back. Soon, Lonan arrived at the examination room. In front of him were 5 professors from Phillips Academy. In the middle was the principal archmage, Clotilde. At her side was the sword instructor, the great swordsman Naberos. Before them, Lonan felt an incomparable pressure. He bowed to the professors. Hello, my name is Lonan, the examiner said. Hello, that dummy is your opponent. Use all your techniques. Lonan said, I don't have any special techniques. I'll just do a quick draw strike. I think that's enough for a dummy. The blonde professor laughed. He said to the professor next to him, breaking the dummy's defense without magic. What an idiot. The white-haired professor nodded. A real bumpkin? From some backwater village. No wonder he doesn't know. It's a high-end piece of magic engineering, compact with incredible defense and regenerative abilities. Even the genius swordsman, Shulafon, couldn't leave a mark on it. Amidst their mockery, Lonan took his stance. Pressure radiated from his body. Almost instantly, Lonan finished his lightning-fast strike. Lonan said, I'm done with my demonstration. But this speed didn't impress the professors at all. They were practically laughing until a moment later, 3 metallic impacts rang out. The principal was stunned, and nearby Naberos stood up immediately. In a flash, she rushed in front of Lonan. Aggressively, she held her sword against his neck. She asked, Who taught you how to handle a sword? Confused, Lonan replied, What are you talking about? No one taught me. Naberos changed her question. Did you see my move just now? Lonan said, I saw it. It's impressive. In an extremely short amount of time, you drew your sword and struck 3 times. At these words, Naberos' expression softened a bit. She said, yes, exactly like your demonstration. Then she changed her tone. You deliberately slowed down your 3rd strike so we could see it clearly. Didn't you? Lonan had slowed down his 3rd strike to avoid hurting himself, not to show disrespect to the professor. But faced with Naberos' anger, that explanation seemed totally unconvincing. The principal could only look away in embarrassment, and the other 2 professors were stunned, as, Professors, shouldn't we have seen something too? A moment later, Naberos sheathed her sword and slowly returned to her seat. She said, I will teach you myself in the future. Back in her seat, her emotions remained agitated. The principal observing, the angry Naberos carefully recalled her words, teach you myself. The principal understood she had already accepted Lonan as her disciple. He told Lonan, you passed. Why did you come to Phillips Royal Academy? Hearing this, Lonan lowered his head. Memories began to surface in his mind, and then he blurted out, to have no regrets. But more specifically, it was so that his sister would have no regrets. After answering, Lonan left the examination room. No regrets, huh? The principal smiled. This is quite problematic. I don't even know how to teach him. The blonde professor asked, why such a reaction from you? What kind of move did that kid make? The principal said, move. No more like pure talent. Meanwhile, the dummy that Lonan had slashed suddenly split in 2 then, fell over. The 2 professors were stunned, because slicing a dummy with a single blow was an impossible dream for any candidate. Outside, Lonan stood with a blank stare, remembering that lady with the sword. Even his former self wouldn't have been fully confident in defeating her. So his choice to come to Phillips Royal Academy was the right one. Here he could learn many things he hadn't known in his past life. Then he headed toward the written exam hall. As for the written exam, for someone who had spent a whole month reading books like him, it should have been easy. After the test, Lonan was shell-shocked. Could anyone actually solve those problems? On the other side, Maria was stunned when she saw his face. What was this guy doing? Hadn't he been hitting the books for a solid month? How could he do so poorly? Beside her, Hassam spoke up, hesitantly. You gave him 2 backpacks of books. 1 for warrior subjects, 1 for mage subjects. It looks like he took the mage backpack. Maria was flabbergasted. She said, what an idiot, barely knowing what she was saying. After some time had passed, Maria patted Lonan and said, stop complaining. The practical exam carries more weight. It'll be fine. In the meantime, the results came out quickly. Everyone stared, hoping to see their name. Hassam passed 12th in practical and 1st in written. Maria passed 9th in practical and 9th in written. The 2 looked at each other as they got their results, then joyfully hugged each other, saying, we made it, Maria. Said, You're actually first in the written exam, even if it's a three-way tie. Sweetheart, you're truly incredible. Hassam chuckled sheepishly. I just got lucky. Then Maria turned around to ask Lonan, but the scene before her seemed wrong. Lonan looked pale as death. He said, my name isn't there. The two were shocked and said, that's impossible. Open your eyes and look again. Suddenly, an explosion echoed behind them. A phoenix appeared. It let out a long cry and shot a fireball. It flew straight toward Lonan. After the explosion, two big words appeared in front of Lonan. Lonan, practical first, written 5/7/12. So we all passed, that's great. Maria quickly realized something terrifying. If he was first, that meant a certain person was ranked behind him. This wasn't good. Lonan immediately felt a cold, murderous intent at his back, and slowly approaching was none other than the holy swordsman Shulafan. He allowed absolutely no one to surpass him in swordsmanship. He asked, are you first? But Lonan didn't want any trouble. He replied, I don't know. Shulafan said, stop pretending. Lonan spread his hands and said, am I first just because you say so? Do you have proof? Hearing this, Shulafan let out a cold laugh and with incredible speed swung his sword at Lonan, but it was blocked. Shulafan said, that's the proof. If you weren't first, you wouldn't have been able to block my sword. Now you must prove that your swordsmanship is superior to mine. Lonan was a bit angry. He thought he could fool him, but this guy hadn't changed one bit. Lonan then said, fine, watch closely. Lonan leapt backwards to create some distance and brandished his sword. Shulafan was surprised. How could a single stroke produce 3 sword energies? He raised his hand to parry the attack, but the force made Shulafan's fingers tremble uncontrollably. Lona then asked, are you happy? Now. But against all odds, Shulafan attacked Lona again, saying, today, one of us has to die. Lona panicked and urged him to cool it and calm down instantly, but Shulafan's eyes grew more and more vicious. His next strikes became increasingly violent. This was exactly why Lona dreaded meeting him. This guy was way too obsessed with swordplay. If this kept up, he'd probably unleash his aura storm. When his aura clashes with Lona's aura, it would be a mess to settle. Left with no choice, Lona turned tail and ran. Seeing this, Shulafan was livid and shouted, what are you doing? How can you turn your back on an enemy in a fight? But out of nowhere, Lona ducked behind Sam, using her as a shield. Shulafan didn't dare attack recklessly anymore. He said, coward, using a woman as a shield. Lona gave a sly smirk. Just as expected, he hadn't changed, valuing the knight's code more than his own life. So Lona shamelessly broke his nose with one punch, making him unable to fight. Seeing the opening, Lona quickly called Sam and Maria, and they bolted out of there, vanishing without a trace, leaving Shulafan totally stunned. At that moment, the guards from Philip's Royal Academy rushed over, alerted by the noise. One of them panicked when he saw the scene, immediately thinking, how could anyone dare to harm the young master of a royal family? He asked right away, please tell me what the criminal looked like. We'll catch him right now, Shulafan said. Don't sweat it. Don't treat me like a young master. I'm here as a student. We had a fair duel. Then Shulafan brushed himself off and said, you don't need to get involved. I'll take care of it myself. Then he looked down to find a crack in his sword. This sword was made of the highest quality materials, incredibly tough. Shulafan smiled and said, interesting. The next day, Lonan and Assam were out in the suburban forest because he wanted to find that legendary river. Melanie searched the map for a long time without luck. It was wearing Assam out, but what worried her more was yesterday's incident. Assam said, Shulafan is the Grand Duke's heir. Aren't you afraid of his revenge? Lonan replied, he's a good person, just way too obsessed with swordsmanship. He has his own principles, never bullying the weak. He's a model noble. I bet he'll just say we had a fair duel. Otherwise, we'd be in jail already. Assam nodded and said, you're right, but then she stopped dead in her tracks because they finally found it. The legendary Fernando Spring, also called the magic veins. Here the stones absorb magic and turn into gems, and even the weeds absorb magic to transform into mystical herbs, because the mana concentration is exceptionally high. Melanie didn't feel anything special. He was just following Professor Marin's instructions to hatch the egg here, so it would soak up more magic and become a stronger phantom beast. Suddenly, Assam felt a wave of unease. She said, Lonan, why is it so quiet? The professor said this place is overflowing with magic. There should be countless animals nesting here. After she mentioned it, Lonan got troubled too. Not only was it silent, but there was also a heavy stench in the air. Lonan smirked and said, looks like they beat us to it. The next second, 5 arrows were fired at Lonan, from the forest, and each arrow was infused with massive magic power. Luckily, Lonan reacted quickly. In a flash, he used his sword to knock them down. "Damn it," said Lonan. "Assam, find a rock to hide behind." Then he marched toward the direction of the attack. Lonan unleashed his aura and charged at explosive speed. About 3,000 meters away, there were 5 members of Caliporo. They analyzed the situation. He sliced through 5 magic arrows in one go. Who is he? The purple-haired man sensed the danger and ordered his subordinates to scatter. He planned to ambush Lonan from all sides. But out of nowhere, Lonan started shouting, "Hold your fire, I'm your ally." The purple-haired man was stunned. Seeing him remain suspicious, Lonan continued, "I'm Anut, the youngest bloodhound of the Adama branch." Hearing that, they appeared, but the purple-haired man stayed, wary. Who is this guy using the same bloodhound title as me? Still, Lonan could clearly spill their internal secrets, which left the group completely baffled. Actually, these were things Lonan had learned in his past life from the giant hunting team. There was a guy named Anut, whose rank at Caliparo had reached the terrifying title of Wolf, surpassing even the bloodhound rank. He used to brag about his glorious exploits back at camp, especially regarding their poacher swords. Lonan remembered it vividly. Lonan said, "If you don't buy it, let your wolf speak." Lonan smirked. "Your incompetence doesn't mean I'm lacking." Upon hearing this, the purple-haired man flew into a blind rage. He lunged for Lonan, ready to kill him. But Lonan spread his hands, playing innocent. He said, "Someone like you, always itching to kill, will come to a bad end." Fortunately, a subordinate held the purple-haired man back. The subordinate said, "If what he's saying is true, killing him would definitely spark a conflict with the branch. Adama, we should let the wolf decide." And this loud commotion also alerted the nearby wolf, who approached, saying, "Didn't I tell you to shut it during the hunt?" The intense pressure froze everyone in their tracks. Only the purple-haired man went up to the bald wolf and told him everything in detail. After listening, the bald man said, "This forest is our turf. What are you doing here?" Lonan smirked. He had finally lured him in. Lonan caught them off guard and killed all 4 in one stroke. Then he charged the wolf. With a flash of his soul, the wolf's head was severed from his body. Lonan specifically spared the purple-haired man. Lonan said, "Didn't I tell you? You're going to come into a bad end." A moment later, all of the purple-haired man's fingers were sliced off. Intense pain overwhelmed him, and he instantly collapsed to his knees, in agony and unable to stand. Seeing this, Lonan tossed the map to him, saying, "Mark every single one of your branches on this map, and I'll spare you." The purple-haired man hesitated. Betraying his comrades wouldn't end well either. But Lonan's terrifying presence completely broke his will. He screamed, I'll write it, okay?" Lonan looked at his spotless black iron sword and said, "Write it with your fingers." Shortly after, the purple-haired man marked every location and handed the map back to Lonan. The purple-haired man said, "You promised to let me live, didn't you?" Lonan slowly put the map away, then quickly drew his sword, cutting the purple-haired man in 2. He replied, "No, of course not, because not far away lay the evidence of their crimes, animals big and small, all brutally slaughtered." Assam, seeing this, threw up her last meal. She wondered if Lonan hadn't been a bit too cruel. Lonan said, "They're all wanted criminals who deserve execution. We're doing a good deed." After saying that, Lonan bowed his head, and before him lay the carcass of the blue bird. Even this was dead. Professor Marin would be heartbroken. That's when the blue bird egg in his pocket started vibrating. Lonan hurriedly took it out. It must want to see its mother one last time. But Assam was suddenly gripped by panic. "Lonan, what on earth is that?" Assam was shaking with fear. Lonan looked in the direction she pointed. The animal's blood was floating in the air, gathering together. As the mass of blood grew larger and larger, Lonan immediately placed his hand on his sword, taking a combat stance. At that moment, the blue bird egg in his hand flew out, on its own and slowly. It rose high into the air. The next instant, all the blood began to swirl wildly around the egg and was absorbed in large drops. Even the blood from elsewhere converged. Assam hid behind Lonan and said, "Maybe we should go back." Lonan stared at the egg and said, "I don't know what's inside, but it's bound to be something insane." 2.5 minutes later, the blue bird egg seemed to have had its fill. Lonan stared at it, blank-faced. The next second, a crack appeared on the shell and quickly spread to other areas. Lonan was thrilled. It's finally hatching. Let's keep our eyes peeled and get a good look at this extraordinary creature. But before Lonan could see clearly, he was struck. Lonan clutched his nose in pain and said, "So fast, what the hell was that?" And what appeared before them was a strange pitch-black creature. Lonan said, "That doesn't look like a bird at all." Assam said, "Could it be a dragon?" Lonan was stunned to hear that. He said, "Sam, are you for real?" Sam said, "Yeah, it matches what I've read in books." Shortly after, Lonan was confused again. He said, "Who did that blue bird mate with to produce this?" Lonan tried to touch it, and the little creature cooperated, nuzzling his finger. But thinking about how it had bruised his handsome face, an annoyed Lonan said, "Assam, we'll have an extra dish tonight." The little creature was startled, so it quickly used healing magic rapidly, ending all of Lonan's wounds before nuzzling against his face. Only then did he forgive it. "This little guy actually has healing powers." "How many other secrets is it hiding?" Assam said. "Let's give it a name first." But at that moment it seemed to sense something. Its face suddenly darkened as it bolted in one direction. It detected something. "Follow it quick." And the little creature's target was a surviving member of the poacher gang. He had just stepped away to use the bathroom. When he returned, his crew was gone, so he hid nearby. Witnessing the whole hatching process, he was terrified and tried to run away immediately. But despite his head start, he was caught by the incredibly fast little creature. The panicking poacher tripped over a branch. The little creature instantly started absorbing the blood from his injuries. "Whoa, stop! Sita, you're gonna kill him!" Lonan's voice suddenly rang out. Assam was puzzled. "Sita, is that the name you gave it?" Lonan: "Yeah, you like it, Sita." Sita looked joyful. Then Lonan turned to the poacher. "You okay, Anut?" The poacher, utterly terrified, fell to his knees. "Thanks to you, I'm alive. But how do you know my name?" Lonan put his sword to the man's throat. "You don't need to know that, Mr. Big Mouth Poacher." So it was him, the one who used to brag about his poaching at Lonan's camp in his past life. Anut stammered. No, I'm just a runner," Lonan said. "That's temporary. You'll climb the ranks later." Then Lonan smiled and said, "I need you to help me with something." After little Sita hatched, Lonan returned to the imperial capital, but he also did one thing along the way, and that was what made them rich. It turned out the water from the Fernando Springs they had collected possessed abundant and pure magic, so it was bought for an astronomical price by Maria's father. Assam said, "Let's go thank Professor Marin." Lonan agreed, because he still had to tell him about the bluebird's death. But Professor Marin was away, on a business trip, and wouldn't be back for a long time. With no other choice, the two had to head home. Along the way, Assam asked Lonan, "What are you going to do with all this money?" Lonan thought about it. Ranking first in the practical exam gave him full scholarship, so he didn't have to pay any tuition. Enrollment was the day after tomorrow, so there wasn't much time to spend the cash. So Lonan sent for his sister Eli. The country girl had never seen such a world before, marveling at the magnificent buildings and drawn to everything new. But what she cared about most was her brother. She said, "Why did you get even skinnier? Haven't you been eating well?" And Lonan patiently told her he was fine, reassuring her. Then Lonan eagerly took his sister's hand and said, "Come on, I want to take you somewhere." When they arrived, his sister was stunned. She knew her brother had made some money recently, but was it really necessary to come to such a luxurious shop, however? Lonan didn't care about the cost at all, repeatedly confirming with the clerk, "All of this can be delivered to my house." "Right." The clerk grinned broadly and said, "Of course," because that dress was already the 15th item Lonan had bought. His sister couldn't believe her once lazy brother had become so successful. She started running around in excitement. Lonan quickly begged her to calm down. Lonan said, "Let's head to the blacksmith. My sword was trashed by some jerk." Before he could finish, as soon as he opened the door, he spotted Shulahan. Lonan was shocked and said, "What are you doing here? Are you some kind of stalker?" Shulahan explained, "I came to pick up my new sword. You're the one who damaged mine." Remember? Shulahan's eyes darkened and Lonan shot back defiantly. "A stalker is a stalker. Don't make excuses." Lonan drew his sword furiously and said, "I'll show you what a broken sword really looks like." Shulahan also placed his hand on his blade. The tension was rising between them when his sister stepped in. Lonan said, "Sis, you've got it all wrong. That guy over there is a total jerk." But his sister scolded him. "Lonan, I told you not to use such foul language. How dare you talk back to me like that?" Then she turned to apologize to Shulahan for her brother's rudeness. But this scene made Shulahan's heart race wildly, as if he had fallen into a sweet embrace. Shulahan took all the blame and promised to take full responsibility. Eli said, "Wow, you are so kind." Eli took Shulahan's hand and said, "It's wonderful that Lonan has a friend like you. You'll take good care of Lonan, won't you?" Shulahan blushed and said, "Of course. I'll compensate him with a sword first." Shulahan reached into his chest pocket but realized that he didn't have any money on him. So he pulled out his family crest and said, "This is my family's emblem. You can use it anywhere. If you want a new sword, go to the forge on Ruchi Street. They have 500 years of history. Normally, Commoners aren't allowed inside, but with this you can get in. I hope they forge you a great sword." After that, Shulahan left still trembling. Lonan was stunned. Is that really the Shulahan I know? Does he realize what he's doing? That Grand Sia emblem could literally buy an entire village. Shortly after the enrollment ceremony began on schedule, Principal Clattel took the stage first. The enrollment ceremony now officially begins. Let's welcome the new talents of the 787th class. What followed was an endless speech from the principal that made Lonan yawn. But suddenly the principal interrupted his own speech and snapped his fingers. The next second, several spatial rifts appeared in the air. In a flash, everyone was transported into an arena. Amidst the shocked faces, the principal smiled and said, "Now, let's give the seniors and freshmen a chance to meet one another." In the next instant, the principal teleported them to the Coliseum. What was about to happen was a meeting between the freshmen and the sophomores. Instead of just meeting and getting to know each other, it was more of a competition to establish dominance. The winners would receive more educational resources. On one side were the freshmen, Lonan and the Saint Swordsman Shulahan. On the other side, the top 4 warriors from last year. First place, Nazduo. Second place, Barama. Third place, Sharon. Fourth place, Alina. Each of them possessed remarkable strength and specialized in different fighting styles. Everyone was waiting for this tense showdown at this Prodigy Academy to see who would claim the title of champion. The principal said, "This is a very important duel. Not only will it determine winners and losers, but it also helps us understand everyone's strengths and weaknesses. You are free to choose your own opponents. However, this might be unfair to the newcomers, so you may also choose to forfeit. There is no shame in quitting." Hearing this, Lonan was furious. The principal was clearly looking down on the freshmen. Since things had come to this, why not prove to his sister that he wouldn't be pushed around at school? Lonan had a stroke of genius. He waved his hand to stop the principal and said, "Can I make a suggestion since we get to choose? Why not just have them all come at me at once?" Lonan's words stunned the upperclassmen. Their eyes were filled with shock and a hint of anger. This was a first at Phillips Academy. The principal consulted the professors, who were also at a loss. Only Nabaros firmly supported him. She also wanted to see what other tricks Lonan had up his sleeve. She said, "If things get out of hand, I'll step in." Seeing Nabaros's confidence, the principal reluctantly agreed. The match proceeded. Round 1, Lonan versus the sophomore Big Four. In the audience, his sister grew worried. Upon hearing the news, she shouted, "Lonan, be careful. If you feel like you're in danger, forfeit immediately." Lonan just smiled and gave a thumbs up, signaling his sister not to worry. At the principal's command, the match began. Nazduo charged with incredible speed. Lonan ducked to dodge the attack. This guy's speed was clearly several times faster than Maria's back then. Next, Elena attacked with 2 short daggers. Lonan blocked all of her strikes. Taking advantage of Elena blocking Lonan's view, Karan lunged forward. Seeing he couldn't dodge Lonan quickly, raised his sword to parry, but the combined strength of the 4 sent Lonan flying back several meters. An even greater danger awaited him because right behind Lonan, Barama had already raised his greatsword. He said, "Better watch your mouth in the next life. I wanted a fair fight with you, Barama." Barama brought his sword down with massive force. The strike was fast and fierce, and the other 3 were already poised to follow up. Impressive, this level of coordination must have been practiced for at least 2.5 years. Even Lonan had to respect their teamwork, but in the blink of an eye, Lonan vanished from their sight, making them miss their mark. What kind of speed is this? Before Elena could even process her shock, Lonan charged them with extreme velocity. Then he began his counterattack, landing heavy blows on each of the 3, defeating them instantly. Next up was the duel between the strongest swordsman of the 2 classes. Barama was eager. He lunged forward immediately, sword in hand. But the moment Lonan unsheathed his blade, Barama saw Professor Nabaros's shadow within Lonan. His aura had already reached the professor's level. While Barama stood there stunned, with a flash of sword light, Lonan finished his strike. By the time Barama snapped out of it, his greatsword had already been shattered by Lonan. Lonan smiled, his gaze meeting that of the professor. Following Lonan's victory, the room fell silent for a few seconds, before erupting into applause. Truly, no one expected this result. A freshman had defeated the top 4. Hearing the cheers, the losers stood still. Nazduo looked at his broken sword, accepting that he and Lonan weren't even on the same level. Barama fell to his knees in despair, but Lonan only wanted to prove to his sister that he wouldn't be bullied at the academy. Then he fixed his gaze on her. His excited sister was grabbing the collar of a stranger and saying, "Did you see that?" That's my brother. Lonan on stage thought for a moment and decided to play the part. He walked forward, slowly toward the four politely, placing his hand over his heart and giving a deep 90-degree bow. He said, "Thank you for accepting my challenge. I learned a lot today." This scene left Assam completely baffled. What was Lonan doing? Had he eaten something bad? The four of them looked at each other equally perplexed, surprised that such a powerful man could be so polite. Arama jumped with joy, then grabbed Lonan's hand and said, "You don't need to be so modest." He raised Lonan's hand and declared, "You are the winner." The sight of the two talking and laughing made his sister believe Lonan had matured. He could even get along with his seniors now. Below the stage, a girl with purple hair was watching the scene. She cracked a smile and said, "What an interesting boy." Evening arrived quickly. The academy had prepared a banquet for the new students. The sight before her left Assam stunned. Only a banquet could be this luxurious. Maria smiled when she heard that as these occasions were perfectly normal for her. She then dug into this meat with huge bites. Assam asked Lonan, "Did you see your sister off?" Lonan replied, "Yeah, before leaving, she reminded me to eat well and not get into fights." It took a while to reassure her. For her safety, I even sent Sita to protect her. After hearing this, Hassan said delightedly, "You really are a caring brother." After his explanation, Lonan grabbed a chicken leg and was about to take a bite, when out of nowhere, Shulafane appeared behind him. He said, "Can you really eat in peace right now, Lonan?" Shulafane's sudden appearance startled Lonan. Lonan asked, immediately annoyed, "What are you up to now?" Shulafane said, "Nothing much, just something very important." Lonan was puzzled. What kind of important business could this rich young master possibly have? Shulafane nodded, then pulled out a small notebook and asked, "Where does Miss Ely live? Is it far from here?" Lonan was left speechless as Shulafane continued, "How are the roads there? Is it safe?" This barrage of questions left Lonan bewildered. He said, "This is what you call important," Shulafane said seriously. "You should have arranged for personal maids and mercenaries to protect her, right? Or did you do nothing at all?" "That would be terrible," Lonan retorted. Furiously, "I sent a flying dragon to protect her. A flying dragon is stronger than any mercenary." But this answer made Shulafane uneasy. "Won't the dragon hurt?" "Miss Ellie," Lonan said, "she's my sister." "What does that have to do with you? Who do you think you are to her?" That question left Shulafane speechless. At that awkward moment, a girl with violet hair approached. She said, "What an interesting scene. Is the young master of Grancia really this chatty?" Hearing her voice, Shulafane asked through gritted teeth, "Why are you here looking for me?" The girl before them was Elizabeth Akalusha, the top-ranked freshman in magic. She smiled and said, "Don't get it twisted. I'm not looking for you, I'm looking for Lonan." Shulafane let out a sigh of relief. He said, "I've said what I needed to say. Go find whoever you want." And he prepared to leave. But after a few steps, he stopped and said, "I should probably send some Grancia guards." Room to protect, but Lonan told him to beat it. Right after that, a moment later, Assam tugged on Lonan's clothes, looking nervously at Akalusha. She said, "That person? She's very strong, but even against opponents who can no longer fight back, she shows no mercy. I really don't agree with that approach," Akalusha said. Innocently, it was just to teach them a little lesson. Then Akalusha immediately flipped the switch. She reached into her shirt, pulled out a purple brooch, and handed it to Lonan. Lonan took it, staring blankly at the medallion in his hand. In his past life, someone had once offered him a similar brooch, inviting him to join them. It was the great commander, Handashan. Elizabeth Akalusha told Lonan confidently, "With your strength, passing the Patriarch's trial would be a breeze." Elizabeth added, "I believe you know what this means, and that you'll make the smart choice." Then she pretended to leave, but turned back and said, "A wolf that stays too long in a sheepfold will end up becoming a sheep." After that, she left with several of her followers. Hassam's anxious heart finally settled down, even though Lonan had no intention of joining them. He was interested in the mysterious Akalusia castle, as there might be clues about the giants there. The first day of school arrived quickly. The entrance exam results led to vastly different treatments. Students with average scores stayed at the Antidia dorms, featuring private rooms and a self-service cafeteria, while the bottom 30% were crammed into a small wooden house. Among them were two young nobles. They usually demanded private rooms and servants, but the professors patiently explained to them, "None of that is available here, and if you want to wash up, there are communal bathrooms in the dorm. If you don't study, seriously, you'll still be living here next semester," said the professor, before leaving the noble young masters only to stare at each other. Meanwhile, the top 10% elite, including Lonan, lived in Nabados Hall. It was quite simply magnificent and grand. Even Lonan was stunned. He could imagine Assam's jaw dropping at the sight of such arrangements. Just then the documents on the table caught his attention. They were course descriptions and registration forms. Elite students had the right to choose their own classes. But for someone formerly uneducated like Lonan, he was curious about every single course here. However, he had heard that freshmen shouldn't take too many classes, which left him puzzled. In the end, curiosity won out, so he just selected all the fun-looking ones. After filling out the form, Lonan looked at the application on the table with satisfaction. He had chosen nearly 2/3 of all the courses. He said, "Since I'm a genius, I should do whatever I want." But he soon regretted it. Shortly after basic swordsmanship began, the professor looked at him sternly and said, "Student Lonan, you can graduate right now." Lonan asked, confused, "But we just started." The professor said, "Student, that's exactly what I mean. You just started, and you've already perfectly demonstrated every sword technique. If I let you stay, the others will doubt their own skills." After those words, the professor gave him his first pass of the day, then the second from archery and the third from hunting. This was making Lonan crazy because they were all kicking him out without giving him a choice. Lonan could only sit by the river pondering his life. But then a voice rang out from behind. "Student, shouldn't you be in class?" It was Professor Naberos from the academy. "I see you've already finished all your courses, haven't you?" Lonan said, "Are all the courses just at this level?" "This is a far cry from what I imagined." Naberos knew he was exceptional, but finishing the courses on the very first day was still a tall order. So Naberos lowered her sword and said, "Since the classes no longer satisfy you, let me give you a real lesson." She asked Lonan to hand over his sword. While Lonan was confused, a magic sword beam grazed past him, causing a massive explosion. Before he could recover from the surprise, Naberos said, "That's the limit of your broken sword, even consuming a huge amount of mana. It only reached this level. You can hardly call that a weapon." Then Nabero slowly reached out to grab her own sword. Moving rapidly with a single strike, same posture, same sword technique, yet she unleashed 10 times more power than before. It absolutely stunned Lonan. The water splashes even triggered a heavy downpour around them. Seeing Lonan's shock, Nabero smiled and said, "Now you know what you're lacking, don't you?" With the same sword technique and the same strengths. Lonan didn't understand why there was such a difference. Naberos explained, "You need a good weapon now, and to learn how to use mana." But Naberos was also puzzled. How could he have shown such impressive force without a good weapon or mana? While Lonan still kept his head down, immersed in the shocking sword technique he had just witnessed. Naberos said, "Here's the deal, Lonan, come to my class." Lonan was surprised and said, "Can I? You're a second-year professor and I'm only a freshman." Naberos turned around and said, "My permission is enough, and my condition is that you don't bring that broken sword." Time flew by until the academy's first break. Lonan told everyone about Naberos. Then he headed to Wuxi Street, stopping in front of the Royal Grancia family forge. He planned to buy a good sword. Assam said, "Is this really a noble family's forge?" "It looks like a light breeze could knock it over." Lonan grimaced and said, "Let's head inside. Even if it looks busted from the outside, it might be worse inside." Lonan was stunned. There was dust and cobwebs everywhere. Nothing royal about it, but Shulafin had never lied. While Lonan was perplexed, a giant paw suddenly lunged from inside the doorway. "Who's disturbing my sleep?" Then a werewolf appeared. He stared everyone down with a hostile eye and said, "What are you doing here?" Assam was instantly terrified, and Lonan was also a bit surprised. The blacksmith was actually a werewolf. Seeing that no one was speaking, the werewolf snarled fiercely. "Are you all deaf, Lonan?" Then pulled out Shulafin's badge, explaining that he was there to buy a Taosha sword. The werewolf glanced at it and said, "That's the Grancia crest, but you aren't from that family, especially the pink-haired one." "I don't see any nobility in you," said the werewolf. "Since you aren't from the Grancia family, we don't serve you." After saying this, he yawned and was about to go back to sleep, but he suddenly stopped, then looked at Assam greedily and said, "Or I can give you a deal. Let me take a bite out of this soft kid's arm, and maybe I'll agree to sell you a sword." Assam was instantly petrified, and before Lonan could even agree, the werewolf approached Assam step by step completely, unaware that Lonan's eyes were already filled with murderous intent. "Do you have a death wish?" Lonan swung his sword at the werewolf, sending him flying several meters back. However, the sensation in his hand was strange, as if he had bounced off something. Looking up, the werewolf had somehow donned armor. Despite blocking the sword strike, the powerful force shattered the werewolf's ribs. "Invisible armor, fine, I'll just have to destroy it." The werewolf was terrified and hurriedly explained, "It was just a test, to test your strength and my armor's durability." I deliberately provoked you. Lonan obviously didn't buy that excuse. Lonan said, you came up with that excuse pretty fast. Seeing this, the werewolf kept begging, saying he wanted to face Tulipin in person, which is what saved him. Lonan spared him not because he believed him, but because he didn't want to deal with Tulipon. Then Lona sheathed his sword. The werewolf smiled as well and apologized to Assam, saying, actually, I don't eat humans, I'm Didi Khan. The apprentice here. Come on in. I'll take you to our forge, the werewolf led everyone inside and pressed a hidden switch. As soon as it was flipped, the ground shook violently and then descended rapidly. It turned out there was a hidden space inside, and the real Cappadoce forge was located there, the largest forge in the empire. The werewolf smiled at Lona and said, since you passed my test, your weapon is in my hands. Under his guidance, they arrived at this 400-year-old forge Cappadocia, seeing Lonan's exceptional talent. The werewolf decided to take him to find the old dwarf Dolan to forge a sword. They said he was a veteran blacksmith with over 400 years of experience. Many of the Empire's most famous swords were crafted by him. The werewolf proudly introduced him to everyone. Soon they arrived at the door. The werewolf said, I have the utmost respect for such an elder. Right after that, he kicked the door in. Lona was stunned. Where was the promised respect? The werewolf walked in without a care, saying, old man, I've got customers. But the old blacksmith's face was already dripping with murderous intent. Didi Khan, you just can't walk in without making a scene, can you? I need quiet to work. The werewolf proudly announced that he had a genius client. Upon hearing that, the blacksmith immediately grew interested. He stopped his work and walked over. The werewolf said, this is him, his swordsmanship will blow your mind, for sure, but upon seeing him, Lonan's young face was something the blacksmith obviously didn't buy into. He challenged Lonan to prove himself, and Lonan accepted. But the second he drew his dark iron sword, the old man snatched it away. He stared at Lonan's sword in silence for a few seconds, then shattered it with a single hammer blow. Lonan's face darkened. That was the most perfect sword he had handpicked from hundreds. Pissed off, Lonan snapped. You old fool, do you have any idea what you're doing? The old man pointed in one direction and said, with a piece of junk, like that I can't even judge your skills in a demo. The swords here are 1,000 times better than yours. Pick whichever one you want and it's yours. Lonan was caught off guard by that, so he grabbed a sword that caught his eye. But the moment he gripped it, he felt an immediate difference. However, he didn't know if his sword technique's power would really make that much of a difference. After confirming with the old man that he wouldn't have to pay for any damages, Lonan gently swung the mithril sword, dropping into a sword technique stance. He wanted to use the Nabaros strike, but without magic he was afraid the power might not be that impressive. But when Lonan delivered the blow, the furnace across the room exploded instantly, and the destructive force left in its wake was way beyond anything he had imagined. Lonan was stunned. He stammered, I didn't mean to do that. You believe me, right? The old man let out a helpless sigh. After all, he was the one who said there was no need for compensation. But what really shocked the old man was that the kid in front of him actually used the Nabaros sword technique. He asked Lonan if he was his disciple. Lonan, surprised, said, wait, you know about it too. The old man nodded, and his next words left Lonan floored. It turned out the Nabaros sword, the secret sword Elusa, was one of the old man's few masterpieces. He told Lonan, the quality of a sword can even mess with your judgment of your own skills. After saying that, the old man patted Lonan's back and added, I haven't seen a prodigy like you in many, many years. But having too much talent is also a problem. It means you'll have a hard time finding a weapon that fits. First off, the materials are an issue. Even this mithril sword can't handle your power, so we need much tougher forge materials to help. Hearing that, Lonan pulled something out of his pocket. It was the bluebird's eggshell that he'd almost thrown away. The old man took the shell and started hammering it, but it didn't show any sign of cracking. The old man's eyes lit up. He said, this is absolutely the perfect material for a great sword. Can I use it? Lonan nodded. The shell was useless to him anyway. Come back in 2 weeks. I'll make you the best sword in the Empire. Lonan smiled, satisfied, then called Maria and Assam to leave, but the old man stopped them. He said, I can't let our VIP guests leave empty-handed. You two go find the other masters. Just mention my name and they'll treat you right. The old man spoke while frantically hammering the eggshell. He muttered, this is incredible. This scene left the three of them stunned, all thinking the old man had officially lost it. That day, deep under Cappadocia, 2 individuals, dressed in strange clothes, plotted its destruction. Lonen's sword would be finished and delivered in 2 weeks. They said it would be the most legendary blade in the Empire. Maria and Assam had also ordered expensive weapons, but they didn't care and even wanted to buy more since Shulafin was footing the bill. During those 2 weeks, Lonen could only wander aimlessly around the academy out of boredom. But while walking, he stopped because the luxurious sailboat-shaped building ahead caught his eye. He remembered vaguely that Nabarros's teaching hall was also located here. She had told Lonen not to show up to class without a proper weapon, so Lonen planned on waiting for his new sword. But at that moment, Nabarros was already right behind him with a killer glare. Lonen turned his head and said, "Good evening, Professor Nabarros," but Nabarros immediately snatched Lonen by the ear. She said, "It's been a while. Didn't I tell you to get to my class? The second you got a weapon." Lonen tried to apologize, but Nabarros didn't give him the chance. She dragged him toward the classroom, saying, "I'll hear your excuses on the way." Lonen said, "Can you let go first? That hurts." Their commotion also caught the attention of a long-haired girl who stopped to watch. She had no idea the guy behind her was already up to no good. He deliberately shoved the girl and said, "Don't block the way. Walk faster." The girl was confused and bowed her head to apologize, but he only got more aggressive. He said, "You walk as slow as a turtle. If you have time to stand around, then train harder." "Got it." The girl didn't want any trouble, so she swallowed her anger since she had no chance of getting in here. Meanwhile, on the other side, Lonen and Nabarros had arrived at the training hall. Nabarros said, "You all know him, don't you, the new student who crushed the competition? His name is Lonen and he'll be in your class." Lonen bowed and said, "I'm Lonen, a first-year student in the warrior department. Nice to meet you all." The people in the back started whispering, "Is he really that strong? He looks pretty weak to me." Lonen heard it all, but luckily not everyone was mean-spirited. There were still 2 familiar and friendly faces. On the opposite side, Shulafin was also there. While everyone, as they were training, a girl opened the door and walked in. She said, "Professor, I'm so sorry. I'm late." Hearing her voice, Lonen felt a sense of familiarity. Nabarros didn't seem to mind and said, "Go take a break. We have a new student. Go say hi." The young girl then approached. She said, "Nice to meet you, Lonen. I'm the second-year teaching assistant, Ando-chan." Lonen never expected to see her again like this. Ando-chan of Kalusha. During the invasion of the giants, her command skills were unmatched. She was the Empire's first female commander, known worldwide as the Iron Lady. Who would have thought she also had such a gentle side? But judging by the current situation, she had no memory of her past life. Should he tell her about her request back then, but how would he even explain it? Lonen was in a dilemma while watching Ando-chan, who was constantly kept busy. One person asked, "Look, is my form right?" While another said, "The towel here smells weird." She could only attend to them, one by one. The great Commander Comrade was actually doing these menial tasks. Just then, the guy who had deliberately caused trouble for Ando-chan earlier walked up and said, "Let's duel." Seeing Lonen's confusion, he explained, "I'm called in a 3rd year. I heard you really crushed it at the competition and I want to learn from you." But Lonen wasn't interested and politely declined. Still, he insisted and said, "Oh, I forgot to bring a weapon." He shouted at Ando-chan, "Hey, loser, go grab my training spear," and Ando-chan rushed off to go get it. Lonen's face had already darkened. "Loser, does this bastard even know who he's talking to?" Soon Ando-chan brought over his spear, but Kalden deliberately found something to complain about again. He said, "You idiot, I already switched to a short spear. Didn't you know?" Then he used a long spear to strike Ando-chan hard on the head. He said, "You only got into this school by begging the instructors. Estro told you to do these things." Right at that moment, Lonen grabbed his spear, looking at him with murderous intent. He said, "I accept, let's fight." But Kalden started mocking them. "Oh, so now you want to fight? Is it because you losers are catching feelings for each other?" Before he could even finish, Lonen hurled the spear at him and then lightly flicked his sword. Kalden was sent flying. With a dark expression, the long spear in his hand snapped in 2. Lonen said, "Here's that short spear you wanted. Don't you love it?" Kalden became furious. He was a noble, untouchable to a commoner like Lonen. How dare he humiliate him like this? So he lashed out and struck with his short spear. Lonen waited without flinching until the spear almost touched him before acting. With a simple flick of his sword, his opponent's short spear shattered into 3. Lonen said, "Yeah, I dare to humiliate you." Kalden was stunned. But that wasn't all. 1 hit, 2 hits, 3 hits, each with 1,000 pounds of force, instantly knocking Kalden unconscious. Lonen's anger still wasn't satisfied. He said, "Lucky for you we're inside the academy. If we were outside, you'd be dead for sure." Those watching the battle nearby were shocked. Calden had actually lost, and he was a top-ranked student in the upper classes. Then, Lonen approached those guys. They had treated the great commander like a servant, so Lonen had no intention of letting them slide. Lonen said, "Next is that rude bastard with the towel. If it smells, why can't you wash it yourself?" Lonen approached angrily and said, "Is the assistant your personal slave?" This scene completely terrified the girl. Luckily, Ando-chan stepped in to stop him and stood in front of Lonen. Ando-chan didn't understand why someone she'd just met would make such a big deal for a commoner like her. Lonen said, "Anyone can be humiliated. Even me, but not you." Lonen thought back to the great commander's contributions. During the giant invasion in his previous life, he said, "At least in this empire, no one is allowed to disrespect you." Then he gently pushed Ando-chan aside. Suddenly, Nabaros's voice boomed, "Stop, Lonen!" A terrifying pressure came with it, immediately pinning Lonen to the spot. It wasn't that he didn't want to move, but his body refused to obey. It was a primal fear, like being frozen by the gaze of an 8-foot-long snake. Then Nabaros looked at Lonen sternly and told him to let the matter with Calden go. "But you have to stop there." Lonen was furious at Nabaros's lack of action. He pushed himself, struggling to make his body move. Nabaros stared at Lonen and said, "I'm warning you one last time. Are you going to stop or not?" Lonen still showed no signs of backing down. Nabaros felt helpless. She would have to restrain this guy first. As the great serpent opened its bloody maw, Lonen felt a violent shock to the back of his head. When he opened his eyes, he saw the great commander, Ando-chan from his past life. She accepted command of the front lines without hesitation, even though she knew those on the front were doomed to die. She was ready to sacrifice herself for the Empire. In the blink of an eye, the scene changed. It was the final moment when the 8-winged giant appeared. Ando-chan smiled and said to Lonen, "Don't forgive me for selfishly entrusting the Empire's protection to you." Lonen called out to the great commander, but it was only a dream. But as he turned his head, Ando-chan actually appeared right in front of him. She looked at him anxiously. Lonen asked, "Are you okay, great commander?" Ando-chan replied, "Great commander. What are you talking about?" Lonen realized that Ando-chan had no memory of her past life. He could only give a silly smile. Ando-chan said, "You got angry because of me." Lonen blushed when he heard that and said, "No, I'm a very refined gentleman. I've always hated their behavior since I was young." But Ando-chan saw right through Lonen's lie. She said, "Actually, you don't need to hate them, including Calden." "It's my fault," Lonen said, sounding a bit frustrated. "I can't just let them treat you like that. And that includes Professor Nabaros. You pour your heart into this job and she just watches. You get bullied without lifting a finger." Ando-chan gave a bitter smile. "Professor Nabaros is actually a good person. The only reason she doesn't step in is because I specifically asked her not to. To even be in this class, you have to be a total sword prodigy, but my skills haven't improved at all in a year. I've only just barely started to grasp magic power. She's the one who gave me this opportunity. I don't resent her, I'm grateful to her." Lonen was taken aback by this. In his past life, Ando-chan had such an incredible presence. Did she also have times when she felt stuck? She said, "I can handle the small stuff, but thanks, Lonen. I'm used to it, though. Getting hit still hurts like crazy." Lonen stayed silent for a few seconds. He thought, "Maybe that's why you were able to go so far, eventually becoming the great commander." Ando-chan looked surprised. She asked, "How did you know that's my dream? Even if it's tough, I'm going to work my tail off." Lonen was stunned. Thinking she had spoken too casually, Ando-chan hurried to explain, "Even if this dream seems totally unrealistic, I'm not giving up." As she spoke, Ando-chan looked down at her palm. All of her injuries were from endless sword practice, but those words had already put Lonen in a real bind. On one hand, there was the last wish of the Endoken from his past life. Back then, she had told Lonen to tell her current self not to fight anymore. Don't try to be the great commander. Just be a tailor and live an honest life. Meanwhile, Lonen couldn't bring himself to discourage an Endoken who was so confident. Even after she left, Lonen remained silent. He didn't know what to do, but it felt like no matter what choice he made, it would be a mistake. After heading home, Dolan sent a messenger pigeon at midnight, telling Lonen to go to Cappadoce to look for his sword. But when they arrived at the forge, there was no one there to greet them. Lonen, feeling a bit annoyed, kicked a helmet on the ground, sending it flying. Maria said he surely had something on his mind, and Lonen wasn't going to wait any longer. He decided to head in himself. After fumbling around, he found the elevator switch. The elevator began to descend with a shudder. But as soon as they arrived, Lonen was stunned because Cappadoce was on fire and many blacksmiths were lying on the ground. After recalling Assam, Lonan immediately saw the culprit it was, a stone man 8 feet tall who was still chasing a group of blacksmiths. After thinking it over, Lonan grabbed Assam and told Maria to head back to the academy to get reinforcements. Then Lonan jumped, with Assam controlling their fall through telepathy. Meanwhile, the blacksmiths no longer had the strength to run. Seeing this, the stone man immediately raised his fists ready to crush them. At that critical moment, Lonan's strike straight up destroyed the stone man's arm. Coincidentally, his recent problems had been bugging him, so he was going to take it out on this guy. The stone man counterattacked with his remaining arm, but the second he swung, Lonan vanished. He had activated his energy field. In the blink of an eye, he appeared on the stone man's shoulder, followed by a clean and decisive slash. The Colossus's proud armor was like paper crumbling instantly. Seeing this, the blacksmiths watched with wide eyes. Lonan stepped in. He asked the old man what had happened. He learned that shortly before, dozens of stone men had emerged from underground and started smashing everything without a word. Nothing was spared. Worse, they had captured several blacksmiths. Dolung, who was forging Lonan's sword, was among them. But Deacon had gone to rescue them, even though he was skilled at forging, not fighting. Hearing this, Lonan felt the weight of the situation. In a desperate move, he immediately ordered Assam and Sita to stay behind and help the wounded. Assam then asked, "What are you going to do?" Lonan turned toward the direction where the stone men had retreated. He was absolutely going to rescue Dolong because the sword was still with him underground. Dolong gripped the sword, saying, "I'm grateful to you for coming to save me, but you shouldn't have come." The one standing before him was Dakin, already severely wounded yet still protecting the old man from the stone men. He said, "Stop talking nonsense and run." But the old man stayed there, saying, "You're invisible. Armor probably won't work against him." Deacon was furious. He said, "Are you really still saying such discouraging things to bring me down? If you think you can do better, go right ahead with that sword in your hand." But hearing that the old man gripped the sword even tighter. "No, I can't insult it with my terrible swordsmanship." As he spoke, he even started to worship the blade. Dakan was speechless. This crazy old man obsessed with weapons is going to get me killed sooner or later. Right then, the stone man decided he was done listening to their conversation. He raised his fists and swung down with immense force. But the blow was blocked by Deacon, even though it injured him severely and even shattered his invisible armor. Just as Deacon was about to die a hero's death, a red flash streaked by at incredible speed, followed by countless slashes. The stone man collapsed and disintegrated instantly, while Lonan landed gracefully. He said, "Leave the rest to me." Deacon, surprised, asked, "How did you get here? Weren't there countless stone men in your way?" Lonan turned his head and said calmly, "They've been taken care of, Dakin." "Is that even possible? I couldn't even beat one of them." Dakin became instantly obedient, grateful to have survived Lonan's sword after having pissed him off. Lonan said, "Hand it over, isn't this my sword?" Dolong said, "Yeah, that's the one. Here, even though the scabbard isn't finished yet. Worthy of being the best sword in the Empire. It feels great to hold. You don't feel its weight at all." As he stood, facing several stone men over 8 feet tall, Lonan casually unleashed sword energy. Its overwhelming destructive power completely pulverized them. Lonan was stunned. How could he have such strength? The expression on the old man's face was enough to show his satisfaction with the sword. He said, "So Lonan, do you like this blade, Amanda? That's the name the astrologer gave it. This sword is nearly weightless, but its hardness is 100 times that of mithril. Plus it has a special property. Upon contact with blood, it even has regenerative abilities." This sword matched Lonan's attributes perfectly, and he no longer had to fear that his brutal style would damage the blade. Lonan praised the old man immensely. To be delighted that his work was recognized was likely the old man's entire purpose in life. But Dakan interrupted them. "We have to get out of here fast." However, Lonan headed toward the lower levels. He said, "Take the old man and go first. There's still a bunch of rats here, and they're big ones." Dakin asked in confusion, "Rats? What are you talking about?" Lonan said. "I know the habits of stone giants. They don't move in groups, let alone attack humans." After speaking, Lonan turned over the debris, revealing a mysterious pattern on the back of its head. Everyone was shocked by the sight. The pattern was unknown even to Long, despite him being over 400 years old. But he was certain that a magical resonance remained in the pattern. On the other side, the other camp was using this method to drive the stone giants insane. Dolong asked, "Who do you think would do such a thing?" Lonan scratched his head and said, "I don't know, but as long as I go further in, I can definitely flush them out." With that, Lonan began to move forward. He progressed quickly toward the depths while carefully observing the surroundings. Sure enough, he discovered human footprints of 2 different sizes. Lonen moved on and even found some magic detection stones, but since he had no mana, he didn't trigger any alarms. Soon Lonen reached the deepest part of the cave, but instead of startling his prey, he hid himself, as he usually did, then began to scout the area. The first thing that caught his eye was a massive golden stone man. Beneath it were 2 human-looking figures. Those 2 weren't particularly remarkable, but compared to ordinary stone men, they looked like tiny toys in front of the golden stone man. Although it was still dormant, its destructive power was unimaginable. While Lonen was figure out how to handle this, the woman in the white robe suddenly spoke up. Someone must have broken in, judging by how our control over the stone giants is being quickly cut off, one after another. There must be a third party involved. The man in the white robe said through gritted teeth, "What should we do? There are no stone men left, and this golden stone man can't be used yet. Why don't we just go up and kill them all?" At these words, the woman in this white robe immediately shook her head. "No, most of the forge workshops have already been destroyed. Imperial smelting and weapon-making technology will be set back by many years. That's enough. Besides, if our identities are revealed, that person will react." After listening, the man in white grumbled a bit but finally agreed. At that moment, the scent of sulfur on Lonen caught their attention. It was residue from the ordinary stone giants he'd killed. The man in the white robe said, "No wonder my skin is crawling." After speaking, he hurled a fireball at Lonen. It wasn't until the fireball was about to hit him that Lonen reacted. But after the explosion, the man in the white robe saw that the fireball had missed its target. He said, "You're pretty agile. How about I tie you up first?" With that, he immediately cast a spell. In an instant, numerous chains of fire surrounded Lonen. Magic power was building up, fast. These 2 were no ordinary people. The man in the white robe said, "Tell me, quickly, who are you? And how did you make our magic stones useless?" Lonen stood up and said, "That's exactly what I was going to ask. Who are you, regardless of your passion? State your names." Lonen's attitude immediately intrigued the man in white. The woman in white suddenly said, "We're wasting our time." But the man in white didn't care. He said, "Let's enjoy it in advance, for when this empire is submerged in astral light, there won't be any more chances." That sentence struck a chord with Lonen, as the invading giants had already mentioned being submerged in astral light. They must know something. So Lonen planned to capture them both, to get answers. But the man in the white robe said with contempt, "You, an inexperienced kid like you, has that kind of ability." After speaking, he raised his arm to counterattack, and that action exhausted Lonen's patience. With a flash of a blade, the man in the white robe lost his arm and lower body. "Stay down, obey." The woman in the white robe stood frozen. Edward hadn't even had time to react, and Lonen hadn't felt any bone break. So these 2 probably weren't human. Pause, but in his anger, he didn't give a damn. Pause. He straight up grabbed the woman in the white robe by the throat and said, "Just play nice and answer my questions, unless you want to end up like him. Just answer me." Unable to break free, Cyril immediately cast a magic shield to push Lonen back. Lonen said, "So you're not planning to obey?" While speaking, Lonen mockingly tapped the shield. "Not bad, pretty solid." But in the next second, Cyril was stunned. With a flash of a blade, her shield shattered into pieces. Impossible. How could a physical strike affect magic? Before she could think, Lonen's sword pierced her body. The violent motion made her hood fall off, revealing her face and long ears. But that didn't earn Lonen's attention. He stepped hard on the woman beneath him and said, "A half-elf. What's your goal?" Lonen's attention was entirely on the woman, completely oblivious to what was behind him. And behind him, an enormous fireball charged right at him. Lonen reacted quickly, swinging his sword to block the attack. He looked ahead. The severed limbs of Edward had grown back, but he was using crawling tentacles to mimic them. Edward yelled angrily at Lonen, "Let her go!" Seeming very concerned about the woman. Lonen understood immediately. He pulled his sword out of the woman's body, but less than 2 seconds later, he drove the sword into her thigh. Lonen said, "It looks like you don't grasp the situation. Neither of you is getting away." The intense pain made the woman scream in agony. But Lonen's eyes never lingered on her, focusing instead on Edward. Lonen said, "Either you come with me, quietly, or she loses her limbs. She doesn't have your regeneration, does she?" Edward was trembling with rage, but finally lowered his head. Then he extinguished the flames in his hand and said, "Fine, I'll follow you." Lonen nodded with satisfaction. It would be a hassle if he actually died. But at that moment, he saw Cyril smiling like a maniac. Lonen looked at her confused. without noticing the arm of the Golden Stone Man coming at him from behind. By the time Lonen tried to dodge, it was too late. He could only tank the hit. The powerful impact sent him flying dozens of meters. Even though the force was massive, both of them knew the blow wouldn't be fatal. Edward walked towards Cyril and asked, "Can you still walk?" The woman nodded. "Thanks. You distracted him, so I was able to control the stone giant. Even if I could only control one arm, he must be severely injured." Edward said, "Go back to the church and report the situation. I'll deal with him and then head back." Cyril nodded. "Be careful." "He's a monster with a child's face," Edward said. "I know, I won't act recklessly again." Before he could finish speaking, Edward's limbs were torn apart. Lonen reappeared before them and delivered countless strikes, shredding Edward to pieces. Lonen said, "Where do you think you're going? Didn't I say I have a lot of questions for you?" Cyril backed away in fear, then hurriedly pulled out a spell scroll. Lonen, pushing through his injuries, approached step by step. But at that moment, Cyril's immobilization spell took effect. Lonen couldn't take another step forward. He struggled desperately, yet he remained frozen in place. Cyril didn't dare get closer. She said, "I can't guarantee a victory against you, but my priority is to report back." As she spoke, a portal lit up behind her. Just before entering, she added with resentment, "I'll find out everything about you and then I'll take it from you." Seeing Cyril slowly disappear into the portal, Lonen was unwilling, shouting repeatedly, "Don't go!" Having finally found a clue about the giants. How could he let her escape? "I absolutely can't let this happen again." "Stop!" Lonen cried out with all his remaining strength. However, at that moment, a strange light suddenly appeared around them. Cyril was shocked to see that her body couldn't move either. A woman's voice rang out. "I have a lot of questions, too." Nabaros activated her energy field and appeared. Cyril was stunned, thinking, escaping easily, but she didn't expect the arrival of someone even more powerful. Nabaros said, "Well done, Lonen." Lonen replied, "Your timing is pretty good, too, Nabaros." He was relieved he could still talk trash, so he wasn't in mortal danger. Then she turned her attention towards Cyril. She said, "Let's welcome our guest first." Even shaking with fear, Cyril hadn't given up on escaping. But in the next second, a slender hand emerged from behind Nabaros, grabbed her face and said, "Attacking the forge is a serious crime. But what pisses me off most is that you dared to hurt my disciple. Expect the worst." Cyril's face tightened until it turned blue. She was lifted up brutally, and before her was a large snake that attacked them. Cyril said, "I'm sorry, Starlight." After speaking, Cyril collapsed from profound mental shock. Those words made Lonen even more certain that the giants were linked to their organization. Nabaros sheathed her sword and walked over, saying, "You did well. I'll report your achievement separately." But Lonen said, "When you mentioned what follows, did you mean sending them to Laudason prison?" Nabaros nodded. "Yes, it seems you know the place." Lonen immediately felt chills run down his spine because Laudason was a prison, floating at sea where screams and wailing never ceased. The jailers used every means possible to break criminals, rebellious toward the Empire. Almost no one entered and came out in one piece. Lonen said, "Listen to me, master. Please, let me participate in the criminal's trial." Nabaros refused immediately, fearing that cruel place would traumatize Lonen. Lonen said, "Please, this is very important to me." Lonen took a nearly pleading tone, as he didn't want to miss a single clue about the giants. It was the first time she had seen this proud boy lower his head, but despite that she still refused. Despite the ruins of the Cappadoce Forge, the Academy had helped the wounded recover. Maria wiped her sweat. "I think we're almost done." She had earned a lot of credit by carrying 7 or 8 supply crates at once, and Assam had also spent a lot of energy healing people. But more than that, Assam was mostly worried about Lonen, who had promised to return quickly, but, "Are you guys talking about me?" Hearing that, the two were startled and looked up toward the voice. Lonen said, "I heard what you guys did on my way here." Maria brought reinforcements while Assam and Sita treated the wounded. "Are either of you hurt?" asked Lonen, pretending to be fine. Maria said, "Instead of us, you should worry about yourself." And Assam, her voice almost trembling, scolded Lonen. "You're clearly covered in wounds, quick." Sita, help heal him. Sita reached out, her small hand with concern, but Lonen pushed it away. "I'm fine, I've already been treated. I just need some rest." Lonen suddenly changed the subject. He stared intently at the 2 culprits in the distance. He said, "I have more important things to do now." Several hours later, the convoy transporting the criminals arrived at the rendezvous point. Here, the Odyssey prison would send someone to collect them. After Nabaros and Lonen had waited for a short while, the sinister jailer arrived on a vulture. Then two equally sinister people stepped down from this carriage speaking in a strange tone. "Greetings, Lady Nabaros." Then he looked at the two criminals on the ground. The sight of Edward interested him immediately. He had a miraculous healing ability. The judges would be very satisfied. That said, he prepared to leave with the two. "We will inform you once the interrogation is complete. We hope you continue to work for the peace of the Empire." With those words, the jailer vanished from sight. Nabaros said, "In a week, Lotuson will make them. Spill everything. I'll inform you of the results immediately." "That's enough, right?" Lonan nodded with satisfaction. "Thank you, Professor." At the same time, he realized that Nabaros couldn't do any more for him. After that, Lonan returned to Philip's Academy to continue his training. The restoration work in Cappadoce progressed at the same time. Time flew by, and several days passed. At Lotuson Prison, the constant groans never stopped, and the most brutal tortures and punishments awaited Edward and Cyril. He was a judge in this prison, and the person in charge of interrogating Edward was him. After a week of intimate contact, Karaka was very certain that Edward had spilled everything, so he told Nabaros to come over. Karaka said, "Do you want to see the criminal one more time? Please follow me. I'll tell you the verdict on the way." Then he led them toward the cell where Edward was being held. Lonan found it hard to believe that this gentle old man was a judge at Lotuson. Nabaros smiled. "I thought so too. But he's the nightmare of every prisoner here. Everyone he judges wishes for the release of death. How cursed." They arrived at the inner prison as Karaka spoke. "The cell is close. They come from the Kregel Nebula." "No, from their organization." Nabaros asked, confused. "That's the first time I've heard that name." "Is it a criminal organization similar to Calypso?" Karaka said. "Yes, but they are much more dangerous. First, their identities are unknown. Second, the Narantia fire and the explosion at the Magic Engineering Academy, those were their doing too. Most of the major incidents from the past year were committed by them." Lonan was stunned hearing this. If this organization had done so many things, why had he never heard of them? In his previous life, Lonan asked, did they mention the starlight? Or some kind of descending starlight? Karaka said. "That's the first time I've heard those words," Lonan said, awkwardly. "It's what Edward said when I caught him. If he had said he came from the future, that 10 years later 3 bald men would invade them, and that starlight was what he was talking about, no one would believe it. I thought the matter would end there." But unexpectedly, Karaka's face darkened. Lonan continued, "I think it's related to their goal, so you probably haven't managed to get him to say that yet." At that moment, a terrifying aura suddenly made Lonan's expression change, and the source was Karaka. He immediately put on his bird-shaped hood and headed toward Edward's cell. He said, I see, it seems our friend still isn't. Honest enough, I should be more sincere." As those words were spoken, the prison door opened, slowly. The scene before them left Lonan stunned. The two arrogant ones had been tortured beyond recognition, with only faint groans proving they were still alive. Karaka said, "Edward is an interesting friend. He uses a unique dark magic to regenerate his body." While speaking, he picked up a torture instrument, heated to a white glow. "Do you know how to handle this type of person? Simple. Use this to poke him until he can no longer regenerate." After saying that, Karaka struck hard. Edward could only scream, and it was repeated again and again until he was on the brink of death before Karaka stopped. Karaka said, "See, we've become close, at least in my opinion." But Karaka suddenly changed the subject. "But the idea that this guy is still hiding something deeply disappoints me. Friends shouldn't have secrets. You know." But Edward screamed that he hadn't hidden anything. Karaka didn't believe him and turned his head toward Lonan. "So why am I hearing about the descent of the stars for the first time? I hope this conversation ends with you and not Cyril, because with the same treatment, she would die." He turned his gaze toward Cyril. She was trembling, begging him to kill her quickly. Lonan was perplexed. There would be no reason for him to hide anything. Lonan said, "Maybe it's not that they don't want to talk, but that they can't like a silence curse." At those words, Karaka suddenly understood and then stepped out. He said, "Wait a moment, I'm going to go get something." A few minutes later, Karaka returned with something strange. It was a hideous thing resembling an eye, the cursed eye. It feeds on human curses. Karaka toyed with it in his hand for a moment, then walked toward Edward, saying, "Let's begin." After speaking, he placed the cursed eye on the other's forehead. Immediately, countless tentacles erupted from the eye and pierced Edward's head. The intense pain made him scream without stopping until 2.5 minutes later, the cursed eye turned blue, signaling the end of the purification process. Karaka then spoke up. "I'll ask again, what is the descent of the star? Edward, breathing heavily, said, "The starlight is an eternal existence, its blessing will save all the weak of this earth." Cyril froze upon hearing that, quickly telling him to shut up. But for Cyril's safety, Edward could only continue. "The descent of the star is our lifelong wish. We will eliminate everything and await its arrival." Karaka found this too complex. He said, "You mean something is coming, don't you?" Edward nodded. "The children of the stars." Hearing those words, Lonan was instantly filled with disgust. But regarding the giants, he still refused to speak. Lonan guessed that the curse was hindering his speech. And indeed, with the help of the cursed, Edward revealed the ultimate goal of their organization, to help the giants eliminate obstacles for their descent onto the earth. Hearing that, Lonan couldn't hide his rage any longer because they were the guilty ones who had destroyed the Empire in his past life. Lonan stepped forward, step by step. The judge urged him to calm down. Lonan approached Edward then, took a deep breath and said, "The children of the stars you mentioned, they're the Ayut, aren't they?" Upon hearing that, Edward's nerves instantly tensed up. He asked, "Where did you hear that name? How do you know it?" But before Edward could ask any more questions, his forehead rapidly swelled up in no time. His entire head was like a balloon about to pop. Lonan was shocked. Is his head going to burst? Get back! Karaka pulled Lonan away, then immediately deployed a magic shield. At that exact moment, Edward's head exploded. Chunks of flesh and fluid splattered everywhere, but everything was blocked by the shield. Then a steady voice came from behind the judge's mask. "I didn't expect this situation. This curse is stronger than I imagined. And there might be more than one. I suspect the first part of the curse is to prevent them from revealing their goal. If that one is lifted, the second one triggers, making their heads explode." Before Lonan could even process this, the hand on his shoulder tightened. Karaka stared at him intensely. "Lonan, what is Ayut? If that's a secret within the Kriegel Nebula organization, how would you know about it?" He then began to gather magic power. He said, "As the judge in this case, I must know everything. Can you tell me?" Lonan was frightened by the suddenly terrifying atmosphere, but he calmly said it was just something he had overheard by chance. "In the underground of Cappadoce, I was the first to discover them. If that word bothered you, then I apologize," said Lonan, pulling his hand away. "Is that explanation enough?" Looking at Lonan standing before him, Karaka was stunned. Even though he didn't believe Lonan's words, his intuition told him that this kid wouldn't harm the Empire because in his eyes boiled a firm resolve. Was it duty or faith? No, neither one. It was pure rage toward them. Then Naberos drew his sword and said, "Stop!" A pair of sharp, fierce eyes stared down Karaka. "You're questioning my disciple and right in front of me," Karaka replied. "Of course not, I'm just confirming things. It's better to be cautious about everything, right?" Seeing the other's submissive look, Lonan said, "Then I'm glad that our misunderstanding has been cleared up." But Lonan knew he had been in danger, because that old man intended to judge him too, standing before the intact cursed eye on the ground. Karaka said, "It's a shame to lose a cursed eye, but their vitality is very strong." Lonan, very surprised, asked, "Is that thing powerful?" Karaka said, "Yeah, and if you look closely, it's actually kind of cute. Want to touch it?" While Karaka was joking around, he discovered with horror that the cursed eye on his shoulder had turned blue. That meant it had absorbed a curse. Who could it belong to, being so far from Cyril? Impossible for it to be hers. Could it be him? Karaka turned toward Lonan. While using the magic shield, he had just brushed against him. Could it have absorbed a curse at that moment? Karaka quickly removed the cursed eye, walked over to Lonan and placed it in his hand. The cursed eye visibly dilated at an alarming rate, then exploded instantly. Ignoring Lonan's fussing, Karaka took his hand and examined it. Karaka said, "Listen, I think you're cursed." Lonan, confused, asked, "What are you talking about?" Karaka explained. "Have you ever felt any restrictions, like not being able to run, or hold steel objects and so on? A curse restricts certain behaviors of yours." Upon hearing that, Lonan lowered his head and said nothing. The reason why he couldn't use any magic power was due to the restriction of the curse inside his body. Karaka said, "Look, it's fine if you don't want to talk about it. Just remember this curse is extremely powerful and full of malice." The conversation ended there. Lonan and Naberos prepared to leave. Karaka said, "Once I've broken all of Cyril's curses, I'll let you know." Naberos nodded and said, "I understand. Just report back to me when the time comes." Then, Karaka turned toward Lonan, but the boy didn't react even after a long while. Karaka asked, "You seem preoccupied." Hearing that, Lonan finally snapped out of it. Lonan said, "Ever since I found out I was cursed, I've been a bit worried." Karaka returned to his gentle expression and comforted him. "Don't sweat it too much. You're Philip's student at the academy. There's someone who has studied curses extensively, and might be able to help you. It's the hidden professor in the magic department. After the Lotusane incident, Lonan and Nabaros departed on a vulture. But the curse lingered in Lonan's mind, and his eyes were certainly starting to itch. This made him increasingly impatient. But fortunately, Karaka had said the hidden professor might have a solution. Seeing his anxious expression, Nabaros said calmly, "That's one of the known signs. It indicates that the curse inside you is weakening. Don't worry." "But do you really not know who cursed you?" After hearing that, Lonan scratched his head, unable to think of anyone who would do such a thing. He was so good and kind that it seemed impossible to hold a grudge against him, but Nabaros couldn't agree and discreetly turned her head toward the window, since the scene of Lonan pummeling Kalden was still vivid in her mind. Against all odds, Lonan spoke up to thank her. "Thanks, Professor Nabaros, for stopping him for me. That old man, his eyes were way too cruel. Without you, I think he definitely would have arrested me on fake charges and forced a confession out of me." Nabaros smiled and said, "It's just my duty as a coach." "Don't mention it." Lonan looked at Nabaros. She wasn't just amazing with a sword, but also a pretty cool person. The more he looked at her, the more she seemed like a genuinely good person. But strangely, why hadn't he met them? In his past life, people this powerful should have shown up on the battlefield. Could the Kregel Nebula have done something to them? Lonan was very confused. He returned to Philip's place late at night. But by the very next morning, Lonan eagerly headed to the Stone Pillars Park, the training grounds for the magic department. Lonan immediately saw Handashan, who had been waiting for a long time. Nabaros had asked her to help Lonan find the secret professor. She greeted Lonan with a smile. "Long time no see. If it weren't for the professor's orders, I might have run into you even later. How have you been?" That radiant charm instantly flustered Lonan. His heart was a total mess. How should I talk to her about that incident? What am I supposed to do? Where do I even start? Forget it. Just smile first. Lonan managed an awkward smile. "It's been a while. How are your parents?" Handashan was surprised to hear that, then shook her head and said, "Everything's fine." Ever since that incident, Kalden was terrified every time he saw Handashan. Whenever he saw Handashan, he would scream over and over, "I'm using the fear I won't change." Even though it sounded bad. Actually, it was really bad. Lonan hadn't imagined that his small action would cast such a long shadow over Kalden. At that moment, Handashan suddenly changed the subject. "I heard from the professor that you wanted to remove the curse from your body, right, Lonan?" He nodded and said, "Yeah, someone told me to come here and find the secret professor." But after Lonan caught a glimpse of this weird place, he understood just how eccentric this professor must be. Handashan could only laugh while agreeing, "That's right. His unique office is impossible to find for anyone who isn't from the magic department. So I called a third-year junior to guide us. But she doesn't seem to have arrived yet." Hardly had she finished speaking, when a purple silhouette appeared before her and threw herself into Handashan's arms, like a kitten saying in an adorable voice, "I missed you, sis." "Handashan, this is a new magic I've learned." Handashan hugged her back. "Me too, Elizabeth." "It's been a long time." Lonan was dumbfounded by the scene. This purple-haired girl was indeed Elizabeth of Akalusia, the one who was yapping about beasts back then. "Sorry for asking for your help so suddenly, Elizabeth. Something came up and I need you to help me find the secret professor." Elizabeth said, her face full of adoration while kissing Handashan's hand. "As long as you're the one asking, I'm ready for anything." At that moment, she noticed Lonan standing to the side. Their eyes met, and both of them went silent. "Who would have thought they were old acquaintances?" Lonan greeted her first. "It's been a while." "Elizabeth." This instantly made Elizabeth's hair stand on end. "How are you even here?" But her behavior from just a second ago was even more embarrassing. Nevertheless, Elizabeth still led Lonan. After walking for a long time, they arrived in front of an old house, and the surroundings grew weirder and weirder. Lonan said uneasily, "You're not planning to bury me here, are you, Elizabeth?" "Like, payback for seeing something I shouldn't have," Elizabeth said. Frantically, "Don't call me that, and who wants to bury you?" "Stop talking, and just follow me." Elizabeth walked toward the house with a look of annoyed. Lonan followed her slowly. Surprisingly, the general was so close to this kid. But after all, they both belonged to the house of Akalusia. Was there some special connection before Lonan could speculate any further? The two of them entered the house. But what met their eyes was just an old woman fast asleep. "Is this the secret professor?" Elizabeth turned around and said, "Don't get ahead of yourself. We still have one step left." Elizabeth stepped slowly toward the old woman. Despite the floorboards creaking under their feet, the old woman didn't wake up. Elizabeth raised her arm and began to chant a spell. "Alpirim's Joybreaker. Open up." As she spoke, a burst of purple magic flared. The magic spread out instantly. Lonan quickly looked down at the old woman, but her condition seemed unchanged. Suddenly, the old woman's eyes snapped open, and her mouth flew wide open in an instant. Her mouth was big enough to swallow them both whole. Lonan immediately backed away alert, but Elizabeth, eerily calm, said no worries. Then they stepped into the old woman's mouth. Once inside, the space opened up. It was an office made of countless books. It was surreal. Lonan was stunned by the sight. Was that only the entrance? How bizarre. While Lonan was in shock, a voice suddenly rang out behind him. So you're the student that Nabaros mentioned. You're just like I heard. As the voice trailed off, the secret professor, who looked only about 7 or 8 years old, appeared before Lonan. While Lonan was surprised, Elizabeth bowed to the child and said, "Greetings, secret professor." Seeing this, Lonan narrowed his eyes. How could this child, hardly even a few years old, be the secret professor? The secret professor noticed Lonan's confusion. He said, "I'm actually over 80 years old. I just look a bit young on the outside, but that's also a curse." Lonan was, words. I didn't expect something so interesting. After his explanations, Secret snapped his fingers. A massive geometric magic circle appeared, instantly beneath Lonan's feet, filled with countless translucent characters. We absolutely have to remove this curse right now. But why do I even have this thing inside of me? Secret wondered, how can so many curses possibly coexist in one human body? And these are ancient curses close to the source. Lonan asked, can they be broken? Secret replied. Before I firmly believed that no curse was impossible to lift. But this time I can't be sure because these curses are almost all unknown. Despite everything, Secret decided to try. He said, I will create an imaginary world within your consciousness. There I will project one curse that torments you. You just have to find the source of that curse that binds you and kill it. Lonan frowned. Upon hearing this, not quite grasping what the professor meant, Lonan asked, so I have to enter a dream and break the curse. How will I recognize it? Secret said. You'll recognize it by instinct when you face it, Secret said, nonchalantly, then placed his hand on Lonan's head, telling him take care of yourself. As the magic activated, Lonan's consciousness was projected into a world created by magic. When he came to his senses, he was in a forest. The further Lonan walked, the more a sense of familiarity grew because wasn't this his home? How could the source of the curse be here? Before he could think any further, a child's laughter snapped him back to reality. A voice so familiar. Lonan turned quickly. In front of him, his sister, young Ely, came running into the house. She said, I'm home, Mommy. The first thing she did, upon entering, was to stare at her brother with such cute, sparkling eyes. Ely asked, why does little Lonan sleep so much? Is he sick, Mommy? A woman who looked a lot like Ely replied with a smile, because babies need lots of sleep to grow up healthy. So Ely, you need to sleep a lot too. Speaking of being sick, if Lonan ever gets ill, you're his sister, so you'll have to take good care of him. After hearing that, an excited Ely pumped her little fist and said, of course I'll protect him forever. Lonan watched this harmonious family scene thinking, did I ever have moments like this in this life? Lonan was so absorbed that he forgot why he came here. Without a doubt, this was a scene from shortly after Lonan was born. So the baby in that cradle is me. Pause. Lonan was stunned. Pause. I really was the baby when I was born. I thought I was born an adult. He thought so because his childhood memories had been sealed. But at that moment, the sound of a door opening reached him. A strange sensation immediately flooded Lonan's entire body. He tried to turn his head, but his body wouldn't move, so Lonan could only stare straight ahead as a formless, dark shadow slowly entered. But the family seemed happy. The mother said, you're back so soon. Ely even ran over to hug his legs, but the shadow brushed her hand away and walked toward baby Lonan in the cradle. Mommy, thinking he wanted to see? The child smiled and told him, the baby is in the cradle. But the shadow reached out toward Mommy and uttered words that Lonan couldn't hear. In no time at all, Mommy's consciousness began to fade. What? Danger, what are you saying? Then she collapsed to the floor. The scene stunned Ellie. She didn't understand what Daddy was doing. She was just very worried about Mommy, who had fallen. But the next second, the shadow pointed his palm at Ely and repeated the same technique. Watching this scene, Lonan felt sadness and rage boiling up inside him. What are you doing? But what shocked Lonan even more was yet to come. The shadow's arm produced countless, semi-transparent characters out of thin air. They were the exact same curses that had appeared in Lonan. Suddenly, a light flashed, and the curse was implanted into the baby's body. At that moment, Lonan realized that this person was the source of the curse, and this place seemed to be a virtual world, likely someone's memory. Lonan gritted his teeth. I have to kill him! Meanwhile, back on the outside, Secret's hand began to shake uncontrollably. Despite such meticulous preparation, this magic had nearly exhausted his mana. Elizabeth had never seen the professor in such a state. How many curses are in Lonen's body? Asked. Secret. Beyond the power of the curses, there are about 10 in his body. Elizabeth was too stunned to speak. Then it's no surprise that removing so many curses at once consumes so much magic, but Secret shook his head and said, no, that's not it, because the number of curses I'm dealing with right now is only 1. On the other side, Lonen couldn't accept this bastard hurting his own family. He gritted his teeth, swearing to kill his opponent. But at that moment, his body remained frozen. It was only once the shadow left the room that the restraints were lifted. But Lonen didn't chase him immediately. Instead, he ran toward his sister and mother. He desperately wanted to help them up, but his fingers passed right through their bodies. As he fell into despair, he suddenly heard a faint breath, so they were both still alive. Lonen finally let out a sigh of relief and tried to get his emotions under control. Calm down. What I need to do now is tear that bastard to pieces. He spoke. A sword appeared in his hand out of nowhere. It was Mancha. Let's settle this. Whether it makes sense or not doesn't matter anymore. Lonen kicked the door open with his sword and charged in like a madman. Soon he saw the shadow ahead of him. The other figure stood still, as if waiting for him. But seeing the other's face, Lonen couldn't forget what he had done. How dare you hurt my family? I'll never forgive you. With that, Lonen charged the shadow at full speed. Against all odds, the other gathered magic and made a sword appear out of thin air. The attack was, unsurprisingly, easily blocked. Lonen was stunned, not expecting such skill from the shadow. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. Lonen attacked, but the shadow parried everything effortlessly, as if playing with him. As the fight went on, Lonen was wounded in several places. Then the shadow exploded with power, piercing Lonen's chest in a single strike. The speed was so insane that he couldn't stop it. Lonen fell to his knees. His injuries had nearly stripped him of all fighting ability, but the shadow just gave him a quick glance and then left, without looking back. Lonen struggled to get back up. It can't end like this. I still have so many questions for that bastard. His gaze fixed firmly on the shadow, and then he let out a roar. Rock, why did you do it? From the way Illy and Mommy acted, there was no doubt that this person was his father. After doing all that, do you even have the right to be our father? Don't you have anything to say? You let Illy and Mommy curse me and you won't even apologize. The moment he heard those words, the shadow froze in his tracks. Seizing the opportunity, Lonen gripped the hilt of his sword. Had magic swirled around him and he charged the shadow instantly, killing him in a single blow. If you won't talk, then so be it. Get out of my body. With the curse lifted, Lonen returned to the real world. He clutched his head violently, trying to come down from that intense combat state. But unexpectedly, an old voice rang out from behind him. Was the trip pleasant? Lonen turned around. Standing before him was an old man with a kind expression, yet dressed in the same outfit as Professor Secret. Lonen quickly guessed his identity. Lonen said, "Why is your time passing so fast? Is it because of this curse-breaking magic?" Secret replied, "No, it has nothing to do with that. Do you feel any different now?" Lonen focused and saw the massive amount of magic power radiating from the other man. It instantly overwhelmed his senses. Lonen said, "From the start, I knew you were extraordinary, but you're even more terrifying than I imagined." The professor smiled with satisfaction and said, "It seems you can finally sense magic power properly now." Then Lonen told the professor about his experience and he noted it down in his notebook. Secret said, "The curse inside you is rooted in memories that you didn't even know existed. But why do you think that person was your father? Didn't you say you couldn't actually see his face?" Lonen lowered his head and said, "I could tell by Illy and Mom's attitude toward him, and especially when he was hurting my family. I felt a deep sense of sadness. It was a very strange feeling. Looking back, that must have been his emotion." Secret nodded his head and said, "Keep going." And Lonen told him everything. "I have no family memories at all. It's as if they've been wiped clean." Secret took a sip of coffee and said, "Then it all makes sense now. Your father didn't just block your magic perception. He also scrambled your memories. And with this magic of breaking the curse, those memories resurfaced by chance. So it might have been a chaotic blend of imagination and real memories. A small error is possible with this magic. And that final strike you described should also have resulted from that. So you used magic without even realizing it." Hearing this, Lonen looked at his hand, which showed a multicolored swirl. Lonen asked, "Is this magic secret?" Secret nodded and said, "Even though you can now feel magic, to use it like ordinary people, you would need to lift at least 2 more curses." This process will take a long time because the curse is on. You are all unknown and powerful. For today, go home. I'll let you know when I'm ready. While Secret was writing in his notebook, Lonan was stunned because somehow the professor had turned back into a child. The professor said, "This physical situation is complicated, generally similar to yours." Lonan then said, "You must usually be very tired." Meanwhile, in the underground caves of Cappadocia, after learning of the stone giant's existence, Duke Grandia went to the scene personally. He looked at the stone giant, much larger than he had imagined. But he learned that it wasn't Nabaros, but one of his students, who had stopped it, which troubled the Duke. What kind of person would have such power? While the Duke was thinking, a young man suddenly appeared behind him. It was the Duke's personal guard. "Darren," the Duke asked, "how are the forge repairs coming along?" Darren replied, respectfully, "Everything is going well. They say it will be fully restored in a week. We've investigated those bastards as ordered, but with no luck." Seeing the Duke pensive, Darren said, "By the way, we have located the student. Would you like to meet him?" The Duke nodded. It seems so. He had barely spoken when the stone giant's red eyes lit up, and it began to slowly prepare for an attack. Seeing this, Darren said, "Duke, my apologies, but could you please step back? Leave this to our knights." With that, he reached for the hilt of his sword, but the Duke held up a hand and said, "No need." Just as the stone giant's attack was about to strike, the Duke drew his sword and said, "You can handle the other matters." With that, he quickly drew his sword and struck backward. The moment the sword's aura hit, the enormous golden stone disintegrated instantly. After the slash, the Duke sheathed his sword, then turned calmly and said, "Let's go. Let's go meet Philip's little hero." When the boy opened the door, he found someone with nasty magic suddenly appearing outside. He couldn't help but swear under his breath. But the other person got angry immediately, saying, "Apologize or I'll cut out your tongue," Lonan replied defiantly. "Soliciting is forbidden here." "No, actually, judging by your getup, you're not a peddler, but a gatekeeper for some noble family." At those words, the dark magic emanating from the other intensified, even more as if he were going to attack the next second. At that moment, Lonan perceived a strange quality mixed into the other's magic, familiar yet indescribable. Suddenly, an arm blocked Darren. "Enough! We are the ones who intruded without warning." Darren wanted to continue, but a middle-aged man with blue hair said elegantly, "Lonan, I apologize for my knight's rudeness. Though it is impolite, may I take a bit of your time?" And Lonan, knowing their identities, agreed. Soon they arrived at Lonan's dorm. The Duke immediately pulled out an exquisite box. Inside was a brand-new scabbard. A perplexed Lonan asked, "Why are you giving me this?" The Duke quietly sipped his tea and said, "Master, Doran of Cappadocia asked me to do this. He practically fell to his knees to beg me. But more than that, I want to express my gratitude in my own way." Then the Duke's eyes turned toward his sword, and he said, "We, Grandia and Cappadocia, are long-standing partners. My own fate was also forged by Master Duran, so I should be even more grateful to you. You saved Cappadocia." With that, the Duke reached into his robe and pulled out a Grandia insignia, which surprised Lonan because this item was far too precious. Lonan had thought he would only be able to get it when Shulafan would have a fit. On the other hand, Maria and Hassam also received gifts from the Duke. The Duke said, "I hope they like them too." Lonan nodded, already imagining the two of them bowing with gratitude. With that, the Duke set down his cup and said, "Let's change the subject. I'm very interested in who's behind this." As he spoke, a terrifying magic erupted around him. Lonan was immediately stunned. "So this is the head of Grandia. Such terrible power," he said. "I don't know what you know, but these cursed bastards are even crazier than we imagined." Hearing this, the veins on Duran's neck bulged, and he couldn't hold back the luminous magic power radiating from him. Lonan was flabbergasted watching this. It seemed that at the mere mention of those people, Darren would have a strange reaction. Hold on, come to think of it, his magic power was identical to those other two, giving off a dirty, sickening vibe. Wait a minute, so are they in cahoots? Seeing Lonan lost in thought, the Duke asked in confusion what happened. Why this reaction? His subordinate was giving off such intense magic, could he not see it? How could a powerhouse recognized across the continent ignore this? Lonan couldn't believe it. Could it be that he alone could see it? To test his theory, Lonan spoke slowly. Do you know Starfall, the Krail Nebula? The organization that backs Starfall. When he finished speaking, Darren glared at him again, but the Duke, totally oblivious, asked, "Did you find that out yourself?" Lonan said, "Yeah, we just chopped off their limbs and they confessed right away." Then Lonan put on an exaggerated expression on purpose. "It was so funny, those bastards were crying and begging us to let them go. Want me to give you the details? The Duke quickly waved his hand. No need. Hearing any more would ruin my appetite for dinner. Lonan laughed and shrugged. His thoughts confirmed that there was no point in pushing further. Lonan looked up and saw Darren's murderous intent, spinning completely out of control, his body covered in dense magical energy. At the same time, the Duke also stood up to leave. Lonan stood up just as quickly. He couldn't just ignore it. Lonan said, "That bastard. There are things you should know, but it'll take time." Then Lonan suddenly looked at a notebook nearby and said, "Once I've organized it, I'll give it to you tomorrow. You'll definitely be thrilled because it's about a Hayut." Lonan spoke the last sentence particularly loudly, as if deliberately telling Darren, "If you don't kill me, a Hayut's secret will be made public." That night, while Lonan was fast asleep, Darren suddenly appeared before him. Without any hesitation, he immediately brandished his sword. But the moment it was about to strike, Lonan vanished. And then a voice came from behind Darren. "I knew you'd come tonight." "Nice to meet you, the third Craggle bastard." Darren's face was filled with disbelief. He spun around to attack Lonan. Lonan pointed to the side and said, "Wait, look over there first. It's my special guest." When Darren looked, he was terrified on the spot, saying, "Young Master Shulafan, how can you be here?" Shulafan was fuming. He said, "Can you explain this to me, Darren?" Earlier that afternoon, Lonan had gone to Shulafan and explained his goal. Shulafan said, "Lonan, you claim you're going to ambush Darren tonight. What proof do you have?" "Darren is a righteous knight, loyal and an exceptional asset to the Empire. He was carefully chosen by my father," Lonan said. "Even the most careful selection can have flaws." Lonan gestured for him to follow and said, "You won't believe me if I just tell you. So come along, it won't take much of your time, and you might even catch the villain hiding in your own home." The situation unfolded exactly as Lonan had predicted. Shulafan felt so ashamed that he wanted to crawl into a hole, but more than anything, he felt rage. He immediately drew his sword and pointed it at Darren, saying, "Didn't you hear me? I asked you to explain what's going on. Answer me right now." Lonan said, "It's so obvious, and you're still asking him. Will you believe everything he says?" Darren remained silent, but he raised his foot and stomped hard on the ground. The next instant, waves of black light immediately erupted from beneath his feet. Lonan and Shulafan gasped as their bodies suddenly felt heavy. "It's this bastard's magic." Before Lonan could react, a swift, powerful blow descended upon him. Lonan struggled to raise his hilt to block the attack and was pushed back several meters. Then Darren lunged at Shulafan and struck. Even though Shulafan blocked it, he was struggling. Darren said, "It's a lucky thing that the young master has no experience controlling the range of his aura. In such a small room, he cannot deploy his secret technique." After saying this, he gripped the hilt of his sword tightly and struck again at Shulafan, who was gritting his teeth in anger. Shulafan said, "Your skills are different from what I knew. Have you been hiding your strength from the start? Since when? Why did you betray us?" "Betrayal? How childish. I was never an Imperial Knight to begin with." Then he swung down his sword mercilessly. When he attacked again, Shulafan with a grim face asked, "Is it really true I have confirmed it? Do whatever you want." Before he finished speaking, Lonan rushed instantly in front of Shulafan and blocked the strike. Darren looked at him in shock. Lonan said, "I told you he's a bastard. How does it feel to hear it for yourself, Shulafan?" He said, "Family matters aren't discussed in public. I hope you understand. Since he's our family's villain, let me handle it." He struck at Darren with fury, then flew swiftly toward him, gripped his sword with all his might, and brought it down on Darren. To block the attack, Darren retreated several meters. Darren thought, has he been hiding his strength from the start? Impossible? There's no need. Could he have grown this much in such a short time? Darren broke out in a cold sweat. Before he could pull himself together, Lonan appeared before him, gripped his sword with all his might, and struck him without hesitation. Darren ultimately couldn't withstand the attack and was hit hard. The next second, Lonan, filled with murderous rage, gripped his sword and swung horizontally. The ground was split by a long fissure, but Darren jumped and avoided. The attack then used his shadow kick to send him flying back. Darren knew that continuing like this wasn't the answer and would draw the Empire's attention, so he thought about escaping. He spotted an open window. He leaped and quickly flew out through the window. But as Darren escaped, outside he heard Shulafan's voice again. "You're right. Unlike my father, I haven't mastered it yet, so I can't easily use the storm sword, but you ran into such an open space. You really are a fool." As he finished speaking, gale force winds began to swirl around Shulafan's blade. It was the secret sword technique of the Grandia family, the storm sword. The next second, a 10-meter storm surged toward Darren. He could only use all his strength to strike back at it, but it wasn't enough to resist that powerful storm. He was gradually swallowed by it. Shulafan slowly sheathed his sword, leaving Darren lying in a pool of blood. Shulafan said, "From this day on, our family no longer has this person." Lonan also arrived on the scene. Lonan said, "So that's the storm sword, what? Incredible power. But you didn't kill him, did you?" Shulafan said, "Don't worry, I only severed a few of his tendons. He won't die. I'll leave him to you. I must quickly return to inform my father of this situation. We must root out all the traitors in the family." As soon as he finished speaking, Shulafan fled without looking back, leaving Lonan in the cold wind. What an irresponsible guy. As Lonan was shouting, a golden aura appeared behind him. Someone rushed over. "What's going on, Lonan? Is the academy under attack?" Lonan turned around, finding the principal and professor, Nabaros. She was wearing sleepwear, so different from her usual attire that it stunned Lonan. Nabaros glared at him. Lonan, with a subtle smile, said, "Your pajamas are cute." "Principal, now is not the time for that. Can you tell me what happened after this incident?" Lonan became more and more cautious. He first asked the principal to repeat after him. By saying Ahiotis, the principal was confused but followed Lonan's words anyway. After confirming the principal wasn't a traitor, Lonan looked at Darren, who was lying behind him. Later, Lonan explained the whole situation in his office, Darren's betrayal and the night attack on the dormitory. After listening, the principal fell into deep thought. "A spy infiltrated the Grancia family. The situation is more serious than we imagined. You did very well this time, thanks to you. We avoided a massive loss." Lonan scratched his head sheepishly and said, "It's just what I had to do, but..." Lonan hid his ability to see the special magic. He couldn't be 100% sure of this ability yet. Furthermore, if the info leaked, it would be dangerous for those around him. The principal seeing, Lonan distracted thought he was worried about the Grancias and said their power to take action is strong. "Don't you worry. By the way, you have greatly contributed to the Empire, not only by saving the Imperial Forge, but also by identifying the traitor of the Grancias, so we will grant you a reward." Lonan said, "Awesome. I'd like to start a club at school. Can you approve it?" The principal said, "A club. What kind of club?" The scene shifts to the main plaza of the academy. Lonan. He promoted it aggressively. After listening, the students went quiet. Lonan posted his recruitment notice on the public bulletin board, saying, "I'm starting a new special adventure club. No age or gender restrictions." He then answered the students' questions about the club. "It's a very productive club, aimed at leveling up your combat skills. We're looking for high-quality members for an elite club. Plus, it's the only club approved by the principal for live combat." At those words, everyone started buzzing. Interested students can join our club. This also caught the eye of a woman in a red scarf watching from the shadows. She observed Lonan from a distance. A few days later at the academy gym, Lonan said, "Despite my big promo in the main, Plaza finding new talent is so hard. It's the last day. Why did only Maria and Hassam pass the interview? You dare complain? Look at how strict your interviews have been these past few days. The combat test laid people out, and those who passed were forced to sign life and death waivers. How do you expect them to want to join the club?" Hassam also said, "The whole academy is saying that joining our club is like becoming a slave. Even Divi wouldn't be enough." Hearing this, Lonan said, "That's not what real combat is. What a bunch of cowards. Forget it. I need people who persevere and are serious." It turned out that Ross also took part in this interview. Lonan had told him not to take the test, but he insisted. After the test, Lonan said, "It's going to be very hard in our club." "Can you really stick with it?" Ross said. "That's exactly what I'm hoping for, as long as I get stronger." The gym was already empty. Lonan told them to go home and rest first. Hassam asked, "And you?" Lonan replied. "Maybe someone else will come for an interview, so I'm going to stay a bit longer." He ended up staying until evening. Lonan didn't see a single soul, literally no one. "That's all for today, thanks, Ando-chan, for taking the time to help us." Ando-chan said, "No problem, but it's a bummer. If I didn't have my job as an assistant, I would have applied too." Lonan went silent. He didn't dare tell her that even if she applied, he wouldn't approve it. He had to quickly decide if he'd let her give up on her dream of being a great commander. But maybe he should think about it more carefully. While Lonan was lost in thought, a voice interrupted him. "What a relief you're still here," Lonan hadn't noticed when she appeared. Lonan said, "Are you here for an interview? Do you want to join our club?" The girl in the red hat shook her head vigorously. She said, "If I joins the club, could I..." Since her voice was too faint, Lonan couldn't hear well. So he asked her to speak up. As soon as he finished speaking, the girl in the red hat took off her red hat. She said, if I join the club, can I touch your... Lonan was stunned. Touch my what? What inappropriate things are you saying? The young girl quickly explained, not you, I mean that cutie on your shoulder. Sita looked confused, hearing that. Lonan said, you mean Sita, join the club and you can touch her. The girl, blushing from embarrassment, said, really? Lonan looked at her puzzled. What a weirdo. Unbelievable, she was so close to me before I even saw her. She's not just some ordinary person. She's exactly the talent I need, Lonan said. Please tell me your age, your name, and show me your skills. The girl said, magic student third year Ophelia. Well, I'll get started then. As she finished talking, a massive amount of mana gathered in the young girl's hands. The next second, powerful magic burst from every direction. The two watched in silence. Ando-chan recognized it as dark magic, even though it was the first time she saw it so perfectly controlled. Lonan also knew this wasn't easy, but what was more shocking was that she emitted faint traces of blood-red magic. It's definitely... Meanwhile, Ophelia stood ready to attack. Shadow Claw. As soon as she spoke, 3 shadow blades flew from her hands, lunging rapidly toward the training dummy. The shadow blades hit the dummy's armor heavily, emitting an intense light. Once the dust and mist cleared, everything became clear. The dummy's armor had 3 large cracks. Lonan said, but Ophelia, did you use... Before he could finish, Lonan was stopped by Ophelia via telepathy. She said, please don't tell anyone. If this is discovered, it will become very problematic. Let's talk elsewhere. I have a lot of questions for you. In an instant, the two arrived at the Academy Plaza. Ophelia looked at Sita in her hand, stroking its cute belly. She said, so this little one is a dream bird. Legend has it that they are born as different species, depending on their environment. How interesting. Lonan said, you're interesting too. I heard that your race left. The Empire a long time ago. The vampire race, said Ophelia. Not everyone left. Some are scattered across the Empire. No one likes trouble. They hide and live in secret. Ophelia looked at Sita in her hand and said, without this little one, I wouldn't have come to the interview. Seeing it in the plaza, I felt the blood magic, the innate magic of our race. Lonan suddenly realized, no wonder Sita has been sucking blood since birth. Hearing this, Ophelia said with surprise, what really? It used vampire magic right after birth. How long has it been alive? At least 5 years, right? Lonan said no, about 2 months. Ophelia looked at him in disbelief, saying, impossible. Only 2 months. It already emits blood magic. Of such density. Suddenly she looked at Sita with even more obsession and said, if that's true, it might actually be possible. Can I ask a favor of you and Sita? Could you lend Sita to me? Promise to work hard. I need Sita's help with Lonan's research, he said, confused. Wait, what research? What research tomorrow? Lonan's group arrived at the Special Adventure Club's activity room. I didn't expect the Academy to give us an entire building. How generous. Meanwhile, Lonan saw their new gear, those Capitos weapons, sent by the seniors. Yeah, Maria's greatsword, and Assam's magic bracelet. These 2 weapons had boosted their strength. Puzzled Maria asked Lonan, why did you make us bring weapons? Lonan said, let's head inside and talk. You're wondering why I started a club like this. As I said before, we have only one goal: to rapidly improve our potential abilities through combat experience. In fact, Lonan was preparing for these days to come. Then Lonan pulled out a map, pointing to a location and said, the first place we're going is here, the Washin Mountains, still unexplored by the Empire. Hearing this, everyone was shocked. Lonan continued, you all know that this place is unusual, so it will be a good experience. I also have some personal business there, but that's not the most important part. What matters is solving your 2 problems first. At those words, Maria and Assam looked at him confused and asked, what problem are you helping us finish our classes early? Lonan explained calmly, yes. No need to be so surprised. It's normal. We'll be gone for at least a week, but you won't have any more classes. Both looked at him in shock. Lonan continued, so to balance your coursework, you can finish them early like I did. That way you'll have the time. The scene changes. The 3 are in the training hall. Lonan said before helping you with private lessons. I need to check your skills. Then Lonan said in a provocative tone, relax, I'll keep my sword in its sheath. Don't be afraid. Give it everything you've got. Otherwise, this will be boring for me. The 2 were instantly left speechless. Maria said, since he's asking for it, let's test out our precious new weapons. Assam heard this and felt hyped up. The very next second, they quickly took their combat stances. Maria landed the first blow. With a firm grip, she swung her sword down heavily. A massive blade of light charged at Lonan. Lonan dodged it easily with a sidestep. Then Assam used telekinesis to control some stones. With a wave of his hand, the stones shot toward Lonan at 290 kilometers per hour. but he remained unfazed. He dodged them with agility. Then Salam moved rapidly, forming a dense shadow of sword strikes, blocking every stone and giving Lonan no room to breathe. Maria had already leaped into the air. She gripped her sword tightly, imbued it with magic, and slashed mercilessly toward Lonan. Just as the heavy sword was about to strike the ground, Lonan jumped quickly to the right, avoiding that powerful blow. The ground was instantly shattered by the impact, leaving a deep gash. Maria stared intensely, swiftly brandishing her heavy sword toward Lonan again. Lonan bent his body and dodged once more. The next second, Maria, who had been attacking non-stop, switched instantly from offense to defense, barely blocking an unexpected strike from Lonan. While attacking, Lonan kept an eye on Assam. Assam was floating in the air continuously, summoning huge boulders. When he waved his hand, Lonan lunged forward instantly. Assam used all his magic to deflect the boulder, hurling it at Lonan. Lonan gave a knowing smile. As the boulder was about to crush him, Lonan finally unsheathed his manja. All that could be heard was the sound of the sword swirling, and the threatening boulder shattered into pieces, instantly turning into small pebbles. Lonan looked proudly at the pebbles, but unexpectedly Assam regained control of the fragments, sending them flying ruthlessly toward Lonan. At that moment, Maria and Assam were filled with fighting spirit. Lonan put down his sword and laughed, saying, "Let's wrap this up. You've both become much stronger." While the two of them were catching their breath, Lonan gave a mischievous smile. Maria and Assam felt a shiver run down their spines. Lonan said, "The special training starts now." As soon as he finished speaking, Lonan chased them with his sword. Lonan's training was truly diabolical, making them laugh and cry at the same time. 15 days later, Lonan handed over a stack of report cards to the principal. The principal noted, "All the club members have completed their courses early." Lonan smiled, "Yes, that's right. So we can head out now." The principal replied, "Of course, you always manage to surprise me. I'll let you go. Take care of yourselves." The scene changes. The group arrives at Mount Washin. Maria tries to manipulate the mana. The magical purity here is surprisingly high. "Where are we going now, Lonan?" Lonan says, "Follow me." We're still a long way from the center. Meanwhile, the presence of Lonan's group, who are penetrating the mountains, reaches a palace. What a surprise! Someone actually entered the mountains. It's been so long since we've had visitors. Let's see who it is. During their journey deeper into the mountains, Lonan, relying on his memories from before his transmigration, finds an extremely ferocious half-beast. Before his transmigration, the half-beasts had covered the entire mountain range, thanks to their powerful reproductive abilities. Later, they had committed all sorts of atrocities, looting and killing civilians in the surrounding areas. For this reason, Lonan set the club's first mission: eliminate the half-beasts. Maria didn't seem convinced. Assam said, "There are too many half-beasts. Can we really defeat them?" Lonan said. "Don't be afraid, I've got your back. This is a great combat opportunity." Lonan looked at the half-beasts in the distance, lost in thought. They shouldn't be showing up this early. A stronger species in these mountains, ogres. Dealing with ogres would be pretty tough, especially their leader, the two-headed ogre, but they shouldn't appear for a long time. Just as Lonan was about to give the order to move, a voice behind him stopped him. "Your intentions are good, but I wouldn't recommend doing that. Now isn't the right time." Lonan was startled. When did he show up? I didn't sense his presence at all. "Who is this elf? No need to be so on edge. I am a mountain priest serving the Great One, the sacred deity of the mountain. Shall we talk elsewhere?" Lonan, unconvinced, gripped his sword vigilantly. An instant later, a figure flashed by. Lonan's Laminda was already at the elf's throat. Assam and Maria were stunned. Lonan said ruthlessly, "I'm sorry, but there have been too many bastards lately. So repeat after me." The priest looked confused. "I was trying to tell you." "Repeat what?" "The arrival of angels is the day the telluric classes descend. Ayut is a bastard." The priest repeated it word for word. Lonan slowly lowered his sword. The priest said, "For a servant of God, insulting others is so embarrassing. This is the most cringe moment of my 200-plus years." Lonan wasn't impressed. "Over 200 years. How long have you been alive?" "I'm not sure. I haven't counted in a long time." "It must be over 1,000 years." Everyone was shocked. 1,000 years. So he's lived since before the empire was founded. Intrigued, he asked the elf, "You said it wasn't the right time. Why?" The priest replied, "The monsters around here have been acting strange lately. They aren't nocturnal creatures, but recently they've been wandering and gathering in the mountains every night. And the ogres, who rarely leave their territory, have been appearing often, so I advise you not to act now. You can rest for a bit and wait for the right moment." Then the priest patted With a gentle tap of his finger, his magic spread through the air like water droplets everywhere. Then a rift formed in midair. The priest said, "Let's go," and led everyone through the rift. Inside stood a magnificent palace. "This is the temple of Nul," said Assam. "Lonan, do you know this temple?" Lonan replied, "Would I be making this face if I did?" It seems this elf is no ordinary person. Lonan's group, guided by the priest, arrived before a stone in the palace. Lonan asked, perplexed, "Is the deity you serve really just this simple stone?" The priest replied, "Simple. This stone holds its own significance. You'd find its history tedious right now. Put your bags down and get some good rest. Our temple has plenty of empty rooms. Don't hesitate to ask if you need anything at all." Hearing this, Maria seemed to remember something. She said, "Lonan, weren't you looking for something?" Lonan asked, "Do you know where the cursed eye dwells?" The priest said, "You're talking about the cursed eye. Why are you looking for that monster? Are you cursed?" Lonan flinched. He asked, "How did you know?" The priest said, "I figured as much because strange and dangerous echoes surround you." "Lonan, can you give me a moment? I want to talk to you." The scene changes. The two are sitting quietly in a pavilion. The priest said, "When I first saw you, I guessed you were no ordinary student." Lonan was puzzled as to the reason for this question. Then Lonan grabbed the manja beside him. "Is this guy really not connected to those bastards? I don't see any foul magical power on him," and after mentioning Ayut, his expression didn't change. At that moment, the priest handed him some brewed tea and said, "Have some tea. It will help your body." Lonan looked at the hot tea. "There's nothing weird in here, right?" While Lonan hesitated, the scent of the tea drifted up. Lonan had never smelled a scent like this before. Suddenly, his eyes widened. "What is this active magical flow?" At the same time, the priest smiled at him and said, "How do you like the tea? Not a fan." After the priest drank the tea, Lonan took a small sip as well. The moment he drank it, his eyes brightened up. He could see the magic around him much more clearly. Lonan looked at the tea in his hand with amazement. The priest said, "It's an herb from the Washan Mountains that can enhance magical affinity, allowing you to sense magic better. But logically, since you are cursed, you shouldn't see the effects so quickly. Regardless, I'll pack some for you later. Regular consumption can mitigate the curse, so do not use the cursed eye to remove it anymore. While it can lift part of the curse, it also drains part of the target's life essence. Repeated use will be life-threatening. Don't tell me you were using it despite knowing the side effects." Lonan said, "I had no idea. I just wanted to break the curse as fast as possible." Afterward, the priest gave Lonan some advice. Meanwhile, Lonan recalled that his professor had said the exact same thing, even though he knew everyone was trying to help him ever since meeting that man. He seemed to have become very impatient. Before catching that bastard, he still needed to stay alive and be careful. By the way, who exactly is this elf? He didn't remember seeing him before his transmigration. In a way, he gave Lonan a familiar feeling. After a moment of thought, Lonan slowly took the teacup and said, "I was too hasty because lately, a lot of bastards have been doing some dark and dirty things. They are waiting for the stars to align." Hearing this, the priest remained silent. His expression became solemn. The scene shifts to the palace under the night sky. The priest stared at the stone thinking, if what Lonan said is true, those bastards are cooking up an evil plot. It would be a massive disaster. Innocent people will be dragged into it. Must I stand by and watch once again? Was this child's arrival the answer? What should I do? The priest was still lost in thought when footsteps caught his attention. Lonan had already come up behind him. The priest said not to sleep yet. Lonan not used to the beds. "Here," Lonan replied. "No, I just wanted some water." Seeing the priest staring at the stone, he couldn't help but ask, "Is there something special about this ordinary stone?" "Why do you worship it?" The priest explained patiently. "Every 1,000 years our church moves, as if it were my destiny, something only I could do. There the wind and rain are constant, and most of the stones are eroded away. But some stones withstand the 1,000-year test. We venerate such a stone and transform it into a sacred statue. I still remember it very clearly, the day we moved this sacred statue. My friends were enthusiastic, but as for devoting oneself to a god, many simply cannot. I often hesitated to leave. At one point I wanted to abandon our teachings and be free. Then I had a premonition, perhaps a signal from within the statue. I faintly heard it asking me to stay, saying it would save the world. 1,000 stones to the Holy Land. I couldn't give up." Lonan seemed to see a shadow of Handashan within him. "I feel that moment is getting closer and closer." The next day, seeing Assam and the others gradually acclimatize, Lonan pushed the previous night's conversation out of his mind. After hanging out here, Assam and the others all improved their magic affinity. Later, Lonan hiked through the entire mountain range with the priest to look for medicinal herbs. Looking at the priest and his kind smile, the questions in Lonan's heart remained unanswered. The first time he saw us, he was so nice to us, and during these days here, he's been very attentive. The more I see him, the stranger I find this elf. Several days later, Lonan and his team were recovered and ready to fight the orcs. The priest said worriedly, "I just don't get it. Why the monsters have become so strange. Are you really leaving?" Lonan smiled and said, "Don't sweat it. They've just gotten weird, not stronger anyway. These guys are tough enough to handle this, so don't you worry. Besides, time is ticking, and we need to get back to the academy to study." The priest could only let out a helpless sigh. After speaking, he gathered magic into his hands. A second later, countless points of light floated in the air. The priest said, "I've cast a passage spell on you. With this, you can come and go from the palace as you please. If danger strikes, don't hesitate. Come back immediately. You must not let your guard down. This forest is dangerous everywhere." Meanwhile, deep within the mountain range, a mysterious elf seemed to be looking for something. This is getting problematic. Who would have thought it'd be this hard to find? As expected, I can't lure it out easily. Could it be with those stupid monsters? If so, I'll have to meet you in person. Back to business. Lonan's team arrived at the orc tribe and observed them carefully from the high ground first. The orcs were happily sharing the gold and silver jewelry they had looted. Taking advantage of their lowered defenses, Lonan gave the order to move out. Everyone was already geared up for battle. "Let's take 'em all out." While the orcs were flexing their stolen necklaces, Assam launched a telekinetic spell. Maria and her companion landed safely. Both sides were ready. The very next second, before two orcs could even react, they were sliced clean in half. Then in a whirlwind of blades, in a flash, several orcs had already been ripped apart. Seeing the fallen orcs, the other orcs roared in anger and immediately charged furiously at the two. Suddenly rocks flew toward the charging orcs. The orcs who were hit crashed to the ground. A second later, even faster rocks killed those who hadn't reacted. It was Assam using telekinetic magic to control the stones. Lonan, by her side, couldn't help but admire her pinpoint precision. The orcs then realized that the two people hovering in the air were the ones responsible. Lonan encouraged Assam, "Do something even bigger. Wipe them all out." The shy Assam then waved her hand, and boulders from the sky instantly bombarded the orcs. The orcs were crushed and scattered. A moment later, the orc tribe was annihilated. Once the dust settled, Lonan's team went to clean up the battlefield. Seeing the bodies everywhere, Assam was about to cry. "I killed so many. Will I be punished by heaven?" Lonan smiled and comforted her. "Don't worry, we'll be punished together." Ross gave her a high five. Assam didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "So I'll still be punished then." Suddenly, Sita touched Lonan's face with her palm, then pointed at a tree down below. Everyone saw someone tied to a tree. Closer up, it was a beautiful elf covered in wounds. Lonan and his team ran over, quickly untied her, then asked Sita to treat her. The elf then slowly opened her eyes. After seeing Lonan and the others clearly, she had a look of surprise and said, "Who are you?" But the next second, she suddenly coughed up blood. Lonan rushed to support her. Sita couldn't even heal her, asking the elf, "Judging by the magic around you, did you just come from the temple?" As soon as she finished speaking, the elf quickly grabbed Lonan's shoulder, begging desperately for him to take her to see that person. Then her face filled with terror, she said, "Those people are coming. If this message doesn't reach him in time, he'll be in danger." Before she could finish, she collapsed. The scene shifts. Sarant is wiping down a large stone. A footstep approaches from behind. Lonan, carrying the female elf on his back, calls out urgently, "Sarant, Sarant." He looks at him in surprise and says, "Why are you back so soon? What happened?" "We rescued this elf from the orc tribe. She wants to see you." Sarant looks on in disbelief. "An elf wants to see me." Looking at the severely injured elf, Sarant reaches out to cast a spell, saying, "Lonan, please give me the details." The scene shifts. Maria and the others remain at the orc tribe, searching the area for any other captives, but find none. They're about to head back to the temple when Assam stares at the fallen orcs. Maria asks, "Did you find something?" The pretty Assam explains, "These orcs are a bit weird. There's some double magic hidden on their foreheads. Something I've never seen before. But what is this magic, these circles?" At that moment, Lonan arrives carrying the wounded elf. Sarant quickly takes her into a room for treatment. A moment later, Sarant smiles. She's going to be okay. Lonan breathes a sigh of relief. A second ago healing magic wasn't working at all. "I was afraid it was poison," Brunt says, I gave her an antidote. Thanks for bringing her on time. Otherwise, I would have lost a close friend. Close friend. So she's also... Yes, she's one of the few who still believes in Signal. Once a faithful and sincere believer. Now that you've saved her, how can I ever thank you? Lonan scratches his head awkwardly and says it was nothing. Let's not talk about it anymore. But tell me, right before she collapsed, she said, they're coming soon. Who are they? Are you really in mortal danger? Hearing this, Sarant goes silent. The scene shifts. Sarant takes Lonan to the stone. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure myself. It's a religion that worships an unknown being. They are extremely mysterious. I don't know who they are. All I know is that they've committed countless crimes. They're called Nebula. Those bastards are coming for you. You know about them too. They sent assassins to find me several times, but they eventually gave up when they couldn't track me down. I thought they had abandoned their search, since everything had been quiet for centuries. But now it seems they're back. You're so restless, yet you're so calm about this. You should leave this place right now. But Sarant replies, I can't leave. Everyone's souls live. Here, if I go, anywhere else innocent people will be affected, and I don't want that. So I hope you'll leave here quickly, Sarant. Wait for me. I'm going to find some powerful backup. In the meantime, please hide and don't try to be a hero, okay? Sarant hears this and can't help but smile, saying, I get it. I'll stay well hidden. After saying that, he hands something to Lonan, saying, please accept this. It's payment for saving my close friend. Lonan asks, what is it? It's a ring. Sarant says, yes, it's a pass for the Mage Tower. If you go to the Dawn Mage Tower, show it to the administrator. They'll find information about your curse. All right, be careful. I'm so glad I met you. Spending time with you was a joy. It's not like we'll never see each other again. Why are you saying things like that? I'll be back soon, don't worry. Just wait for me. Then his face turns serious as he says, should I celebrate our long-awaited reunion, my long-lost close friend? No, I should probably call you the Nebula Assassin instead. Brigida the elf, who was previously injured, suddenly stands up. Lightning surrounds her body, and her hair instantly turns from yellow to white. Brigida smiles and asks, how have you been? Sarant, he said. So they chose you as the assassin. It seems your organization is quite violent and cruel. Brigida said, you're giving a paralyzing drug to a patient. Isn't that the same thing? Sarant replied. Of course, because your pathetic acting was way too easy to see through. Even the part where you pretended to be captured by orcs. Brigida said, I had no choice. Meeting you isn't an easy task. I used those monsters to lure you out, but I couldn't get you to budge. By chance, I saw those people running around with your magic. I figured if I killed them and left them near you, it might finally smoke you out. But I held back because I'm a devout believer, right? Sarant said, if that's the case, I won't let you succeed, Brigida. She said, that's scary. I can't even joke around anymore. Now then, enough small talk. My goal in coming here is to deliver the organization's orders. Persuade Sarant. If he refuses, kill him. Before she could finish, the two sides were at a total standoff. In an instant, the energy from both centers clashed, creating a massive explosion. The area around the temple shook. Lonan, who had just left the temple, noticed it too. But at that moment, he ran into Assam and the others returning. Maria said, Lonan, there you are. Lonan said, yeah. Did you find any other captives? Maria replied, no, but we discovered something suspicious. Assam said, I found some strange magic circles on the head of every orc. Circles I've never seen before. Lonan listened with a puzzled expression. But just then a massive bolt of lightning struck behind him. Everyone was shocked. Did that explosion come from the temple? In that moment, Lonan suddenly got a bad feeling. At the same time, an enormous foot slammed down, making the ground shake violently. Turning around, a giant monster suddenly appeared, ferociously tearing through everything. After a closer look, they realized this monster had two heads. It was an ogre, a two-headed ogre, facing its massive form. Assam and the others hesitate, not knowing what to do for a moment. Behind them, Lonan grips his sword and shouts, get it together, follow me. You guys won't make it. The ogre watches them with contempt. A second later, a hand lunges from behind Ross. Ross says, what's happening? I can't move my body. The giant hand strikes Ross violently, sending him flying at 180 miles per hour. He crashes heavily against a wall. Assam and Maria are stunned. Before they can regain their composure, the two-headed ogre raises his fist high again and brings it down mercilessly. Surprisingly, they can't move their bodies either. At that moment, a sword flashes like a gust of wind from behind. Lonan helps block the attack. But the ogre's fist is unharmed. The two-headed ogre is very surprised. He blocked my hit. Lonan tells Assam and Maria, take Sita and look after Ross. Let me handle this. Meanwhile, Sarant and Brigida are locked in combat. The clash of energy even makes the temple walls crack. Brigida rushes in, her sword swirling at breakneck speed. Sarant quickly casts a spell to resist. Using wind control arts centered on Sarant, violent winds swirl constantly around him, but a second later, they rapidly form into a storm heading straight for Brigida. Faced with this massive storm, Brigida isn't scared at all. On the contrary, she looks joyful and says, "Awesome, this is exactly what I wanted." Before she finishes speaking, she immediately imbues her sword with dark magic. A murderous aura erupts, instantly, gathering the surrounding dark magic at the heart of her blade. As the sword swings down, it transforms into a pillar of black light, charging rapidly toward Sarant. The two powerful forces converge in midair, leaving no clear winner. The resulting explosion shatters everything around it. Once the smoke clears, both are unharmed. Suddenly, Brigida vanishes at extreme speed. Only the sound of a sword slash can be heard. Brigida suddenly appears in front of him. Sarant is caught off guard, but the magic shield he prepared in advance blocks the attack. Their murderous glares lock, briefly before energy surges again, pushing them back instantly. Brigida says, "Not bad, you old fox. Killing you would be a waste. Join our organization. You could definitely get a leadership position." Sarant refuses angrily. "No way! I could never serve an evil cult. Besides, you're pretty rusty. Your movements have slowed down." "Is your cult not treating you well?" Brigida replies, "Of course not. I'm just a little bored. I wanted to see you in action. I know you're buying time for those kids to escape. Your excuse is to keep those people from getting involved. Isn't it? Do you really think that'll let them get away safely? Why would you, who has no interest in the world, protect them this much?" Sarant seems to have been found out. He looks at her in surprise and says, "They're just guests I met. Don't hurt them for no reason. If you dare touch them, I won't let you leave." He speaks politely, but Brigida mocks him. "Oh my, how scary, but what can I do?" Before she finishes, a loud explosion echoes from deep in the forest. Sarant is startled. That direction is towards Lonan. "Brigida, you bastard!" Before he can react, Brigida had already lunged behind him. She smiles eerily and says, "Sarant, is this any time to be distracted? All that is heard is the sound of a falling sword." Sarant's arm falls elsewhere. After Lonan told him to leave, the two-headed ogre struck down a blow that Lonan immediately blocked. Maria and the others couldn't help but hold their breath in anxiety. Lonan approaches the ogre. After a close look, he discovers that its eyes are enchanted, identical to the stone men of Cappadocia. This is clearly the work of the Nebula organization. While Lonan is observing, the two-headed ogre attacks again, forcing Lonan to quickly back up and dodge. He then immediately launches an attack. He leaps into the air, grips the Ramankas firmly, and strikes at the center of its body, followed by several other sword slashes. But the ogre's skin has hardened, preventing any fatal damage. Damn, it's still as tough as ever. That blow pisses it off too. Before Lonan can land, the two-headed ogre is already swinging its fist at him with all its might. By the time he reacts, the fist is already in his face. But he manages to block it with his sword, though the massive recoil sends him flying back. To avoid being thrown too far, he has to plunge his sword into the ground, yet he's still pushed back several meters. His hand holding the sword won't stop shaking. Man, its strength is still as insane as before. Seeing that Lonan is holding his ground, the two-headed ogre uproots a tree with its left hand, grabs another with its right, and hurls them. But Lonan remains unfazed. He hardens his gaze, looks at Ross on the ground, and says, "You messed up big time. Hurting my friend right in front of me? You're dead meat, bastard." As the tree flies at him, Lonan quickly brandishes his sword, slicing the tree in half instantly. Then he uses the split tree as a platform, dashing back and forth through the trees before finally appearing above the two-headed ogre. With lightning speed, Lonan tightens his grip on his sword, gathering his power. "The reason I couldn't beat you fast before I crossed over was because I had neither the weapon nor the technique. But now it's different. I have the techniques of Ramanka and Professor Nabaris." In an instant, the energy around Lonan rapidly concentrates into his sword, the spinning soul. The Ramanka spins rapidly, generating a cutting force that slices through the two-headed ogre at full speed. The moment Lonan lands, he slowly sheathes his sword. The two-headed ogre, utterly bewildered, wonders how he could have been cut through. As Lonan clicks his sword into place, the creature's body shatters. Instantly, a confident man never looks back. That took way too long. Lonan slowly approaches Assam's group and asks, "How's Ross?" "He's okay. Don't worry, we've given him first aid. But he needs a full checkup." Seeing that Ross isn't in critical condition, Lonan breathes a sigh of relief. He says, "All right, keep treating him here. Assam asks Lonan, "What about you?" Lonan says, "I'm heading back to the temple to see what's up." When Lonan arrives at the temple, he is immediately shocked by the scene before him. Before he left, the temple was still magnificent and sacred. How could it have been completely destroyed in the blink of an eye? What happened? I wasn't even gone that long. At that moment, Lonan feels a presence behind him. Turning around, he sees Sarant, pale and ghostly, desperate for help and missing an arm. Yet he smiles and says, "It seems you're safe and sound."
"I'm so sorry. I should have come to save you sooner, Sarant."
"Get inside," staggers forward, and Lonan immediately runs to support him. Lonan asks, "What the hell happened?" Sarant replies, "I'm fine, don't worry about me, you need to get out of here fast." Before they can finish, suddenly a dark shadow pierces through Sarant's chest. Sarant coughs up a mouthful of blood. Then a figure rapidly approaches from behind Lonan. Looking back, an elf armed with a sword leaps forward. She gives Sarant a mocking smile and says, "Is this how you treat an old friend? I didn't expect that, even with one arm. Cut off, you could still launch such a powerful death blow. You almost had me there. Too bad for you, I've received the blessing of the stars, so you can't kill me." Sarant grits his teeth hearing this. Then the elf addresses Lonan in a taunting tone. "I didn't expect you to survive." The two-headed ogre. "Impressive." Lonan glares at her and asks, "Who are you, Brigida?" Says, "Oh my, what a scatterbrain. I guess you haven't seen this face before. Allow me to greet you once again. Thank you so much for saving my life. You're the elf who was captured by the orcs, aren't you? I like you. Thanks to you, I broke through the temple's barrier. As a reward, your death will be quick." Then Brigida unleashes a powerful aura. Two streams of dark energy surge forth, like a tide, transforming into shadow blades flying toward Lonan. After the smoke clears, only a large crater remains on the ground. Brigida says, "Interesting, you actually dodged that." Lonan ignores her, looking solemnly at the wounded Sarant. He says, "Sita, help heal Sarant. You have to save him." Sita immediately casts a healing spell to treat him. Meanwhile, Lonan slowly approaches and says, "You, bastard, not only did you destroy the Empire's forces, but you also sent spies to watch them. And now you've come here to sow chaos. How interesting. So you must have met our children of the star. I heard some kid was killing believers on missions. Was that you?" No sooner does she finish than Lonan surprises her with a sword strike, but Brigida easily dodges with a sidestep. Brigida says, "Such skill at your age, no wonder he fell." Seeing that she dodged his attack, Lonan backs off to create distance. But Brigida instantly appears by his side. Swinging her sword, Lonan barely blocks the attack. She seems able to predict my movements. I should kill her in one blow when she lets her guard down. Lonan attacks. Brigida smiles as she parries his strike. Brigida says, "I really like you. Killing you would be a waste. Do you want to join our organization? We'll offer you benefits and accommodations." Lonan refuses immediately, saying, "You must be dreaming." Brigida says, "You don't have a choice." As she finishes, several spikes of dark energy pierce through the body of Sarant. "If you refuse, I'll kill him first." Lonan's eyes widen in shock. He grips his sword tightly. Brigida laughs like a maniac. "Sarant's life depends on your choice. Now make your pick," Lonan says. "My decision is to tear you apart, you bastard." Then Lonan strikes with all his might. Brigida quickly backs up several meters. She says, "The more you resist, the more I want you." In just a few dozen seconds, the two have already exchanged several rounds of mid-air attacks. Two sword energies clash violently in the air, creating invisible shockwaves that even make the surrounding air tremble. Sarant watches with deep concern. Meanwhile, Lonan leaps forward, grips Romanka tightly to gather his strength, and strikes at Brigida. Brigida gives a wicked smile. "Excellent! It's been a long time since I've faced an opponent this strong." Just as Lonan swings his sword, Brigida catches it with one hand. She says, "Killing you would be a waste. Be a good boy and obey. If you move again, I won't be able to stop myself from killing you." As she finishes, a dark energy suddenly pierces Lonan's body. Brigida says, "When you open your eyes again, the stars will welcome you." Lonan has no time to defend himself. Just as the sword was about to pierce his heart, a green light flashes, protecting Lonan. Brigida shouts furiously, "Sarant, you again?" It was Sarant's shield magic. Sarant says, "I told you if you dare touch him, I will never forgive you." Lonan says, "Sarant, your wounded body can't handle this spell. Leave the rest to me." "Sarant, you did great. You bought me enough time. I've got it from here." Hey, finishes, and a blue light envelops Lonan with a flick of Sarant's finger. Lonan is instantly warped away. Seeing this, Brigida pursues with her sword, but her body is suddenly riddled with blue lightning, leaving her unable to move. She looks up. 3 circles of forbidden magic appeared in the sky. Brigida is shocked. How can you?
with so many injuries.
Sarant says to Brigida, our relationship ends here. Farewell, my former sister. Then a massive blue lightning bolt strikes Brigida. Electrocuted, she screams in pain. Lonen watches, in disbelief. Despite Brigida's painful cries, Sarant shows no mercy. Instead, he intensifies the lightning's power. Sarant says, I must kill her at all costs, even if I burn through all my magic and life force. In agony, Brigida becomes furious. Sarant, you fool, you stone worshipper! How dare you! How dare you! As she finishes speaking, Brigida instantly erupts with a powerful, dark aura and steps forward. She says, I am the chosen apostle of the stars. As long as we have the blessing of the stars, no one will ever dare stand in our way. There's no longer any need to go easy on someone like you. So die now. Lonen immediately flies in front of Sarant to protect him. Seeing that Brigida hasn't fallen, Sarant uses telepathic magic to speak to Lonen. Can you hear me, Lonen? There's no time. I'll be blunt. Her stellar blessing seems to resist my magical attacks, but she's badly hurt and moving slowly. I'll keep her busy. Use that chance to get out of here fast. Lonen remembers that the giant from earlier also had that ability. Then he says, who said you could say goodbye? As he finishes a sword/energy, suddenly rushes toward Brigida. Brigida hastily blocks it. Sarant gasps and turns around. Lonen is still there. Lonen says, don't give up on me, Sarant. It's not over yet. You clearly don't know that I've never run away. Not before and not now. So trust me this time. Them turn to Lonen, who is blushing. Brigida waves her hand and says, I guess I've been way too soft. Die now. Dark sword blades surge toward him like a tide. At the moment of impact, a blue flash envelops Lonen. Brigida is once again trapped by blue lightning. Seizing this opportunity, Sarant quickly focuses magic on his index finger. As soon as his finger points downward, Brigida is hit hard, but thanks to her magic immunity, she isn't affected at all. She says, do you think this means anything? With the star's blessing, you aren't even worthy of scratching me. As Brigida brings her sword down, Lonen has already appeared in front of her. With only the sound of a blade, Brigida's arm falls. It was Lonen's lightning-fast strike. Lonen says, I hope you still think that way. Brigida's face is a mask of pure disbelief. How did you break the star's blessing? The next second, her face contorts as she screams frantically, this is impossible. But before she can utter another word, her body is covered in countless sword wounds. Blood sprays from her body. Lonen says, then go ask it yourself. That star you believe in, blood, gushes out and she finally collapses. To die now. Just a little more time, and I would have reached the truth I sought. I've waited so long for this. I wonder if you've found your truth, Sarant says. Brigida slowly closes her eyes. Lonen looks at the fallen Brigida, deeply moved. If she hadn't been so complacent, due to the star's blessing, I would have been the one down there. But before, during my journey, only I could harm the giants while others couldn't. Even now, Brigida had this power. Can it really be a blessing? At that moment, Sarant calls out from behind him. Lonen, he says with a trembling voice. Lonen runs to his side immediately. Sarant, hang in there, Sita. Save him. But Sita can't do anything. Lonen says, Sarant, wait. Just a little longer. I'll find a more skilled healer. But Sarant grabs Lonen's hand and says, Lonen, I'm okay. I'm sorry I'm asking you for one last favor. A moment later, Sarant slowly leans against the sacred stone. His body bleeding non-stop. The next second, he coughs up blood. I'm sorry you have to see me like this. Lonen blames himself. I'm so sorry. If it weren't for me, none of this would have happened. But Sarant interrupts him. Don't say that. It was only a matter of time. No one is to blame Lonen. The battle will be long and hard. You risk losing so much in the future. I'm sorry to say this, but don't ever give up. I know you can do it. Lonen looks at him, sadly. Suddenly, the sacred stone behind Sarant glows with light, then centering on Sarant, a light shines blindingly. After the light fades, the body of Sarant slowly petrifies. But Sarant smiles and says, thank you, Lonen, for helping me find the truth. I will stay with the god Senyel, forever by your side, watching over you. As he finishes, Sarant turns into an oval stone. Lonen watches in silence. At that moment, the cloudy sky gradually clears, revealing a ray of sunshine. Rest in peace, Sarant. Then Lonen prayed for Sarant, then left that place, returning to the academy. The scene shifts to the principal's office. The principal examines the adventure report submitted by Lonen. He says, the adventure activities of your club are very dangerous. I should think long and hard before letting you go back out. Lonen quickly explains, that was entirely because of that crazy woman. Next time won't be that bad. so please don't cancel our club's activities. The principal says you suffered such serious injuries and you even witnessed the death of... So are you really doing okay, Lonan? Hearing this, Lonan clenches his fist and says, to say that I'm fine would be lying to you. But if I let it get to me, I think he'd be even sadder. So don't worry about me. Thanks for your concern. Seeing this, the principal didn't press any further. All right, I understand. That puts me at ease. You took out the orcs and defeated a criminal. I can't exactly punish students who achieve great things. But can you promise me that if you cross paths with this organization again, you won't do anything reckless? I can't let my students take such risks. Lonan agreed immediately. Of course I promise. If that's all, I'll be going. I'll check in with you before our next adventure. As Lonan walked away, the principal hesitated for a moment, wanting to give him some advice. Lonan wasn't going to class anymore. He must not have heard him. The scene shifts to the club building. Lonan wanted to oversee their training, but the place was empty. Hassam and the others weren't there. However, a familiar figure was sitting there stiffly. Lonan said, "Why are you here, Shulafine?" Shulafine turned to Lonan with a serious expression. "Finally, you're here. I hope you have time now. We need to talk about the Nebula organization." Lonan, skipping the pleasantries, asked her point blank, "What do you want to tell me? Did you handle those traitors at your place before coming here?" Shulafine replied, "Yes, we conducted a massive sweep and caught 19 spies. I personally interrogated 5 of them. The rest will be sent to Odosin for questioning. But there's a major problem. The restrictions no longer affect them." Lonan was shocked. What are you saying? The restrictions don't work anymore." "Yes, during our investigation of those 19 people, the restrictions didn't work on any of them. They might have removed the relevant restrictions. I think it's safe to assume that. Damn, that's so annoying. There's no other way. Do we have to identify them one by one? By their magical powers?" While Lonan was thinking, Shulafine stood up ready to leave. "All right, I'll let you know if there's any news. Anyway, I look forward to seeing you again during the upcoming midterm exams." Lonan looked completely confused. "What are you talking about, exams?" 2 days later, on an island controlled by the Phillips Academy, Naberius was explaining the rules for the midterm exam. "As you know, my class focuses on practical combat. I'd really love to send you to a real battlefield to train, but school regulations forbid it. What a shame, it would have been fun. However, my evaluation method is just as good. I will scatter you across this island for a real no-holds-barred duel. Of course don't fear death, because I've made arrangements to ensure your safety." She showed some bracelets on a display stand and said, "As soon as the wearer of this bracelet loses their ability to fight, they will be automatically sent back to the Academy Square. The Academy's best healers are waiting there." Suddenly, Naberius said enthusiastically, "So everyone can treat this like a fight to the death. Use every strategy and technique you have. Go wild, Lonan." Was surprised to see Naberius so excited for the first time. "Next, I'll call out names to come and collect your bracelets. When you put on the bracelet, you will be teleported to a fixed coordinate. First, Andershane." Lonan watched Andershane walk up, slowly, feeling a bit worried. The others were whispering among themselves. "Andershane, she's just a jack of all trades. She usually takes classes with me, and now she's taking the exam with us too." That's good. "With an idiot like her, we won't be in last place." Hearing that, Lonan was furious, but then he thought, with the current strength of the great commander at the evaluation, she's just going to get completely wrecked. So for the great commander, the best decision is the next second. When Andershane put on the bracelet, she was instantly teleported. Then everyone was teleported. Lonan was also teleported somewhere on the island. He looked around, finding no one, and thought, "I was transported here all alone. Am I that lucky? Is this really what I wanted?" Lonan laughed coldly. "Stop hiding. Come out. You seem very nervous, sir. Damn, why did I have to run into this monster right at the start?" The next moment, the student, hiding behind the tree, leaped into the air, swinging an axe at Lonan's head. As the smoke cleared, a long sword was at his neck. Lonan said, "You're going too far. And this is how you treat your fellow classmates. As your underclassmen, this makes me a little unhappy. It seems those of you teleported to the same spot have formed a temporary alliance. Maybe because this is Phillips, your ability to handle various situations isn't bad," but before he could finish talking, Lonan launched a stone at high speed. The long-haired guy in the tree was hit before he could even react, falling heavily to the ground. "That wasn't your best strategy." Seeing this, the black-haired leader immediately shouted, "The ambush failed. Everyone get ready for combat. Even if he's a monster, he's alone. We have him outnumbered." In an instant, everyone who was hiding showed themselves and rushed Lonan desperately. A moment later, Lonan slowly sheathed his sword and said, as expected of second-year students. That actually took some time. Just then, a movement ahead caught Lonan's attention. 3 male students had surrounded a female student they were bullying. One boy said, "I didn't think you'd hold out this long. The game is over. Give it up." Despite her injuries, Anderchain watched her opponents closely to map out a strategy. "I might be at my limit, but they seem to have lowered their guard, and with Oyun, that third-year honors student, in the lead, they're so sure they won't lose that they're getting sloppy. Exposing their weaknesses, I only have one shot. In a single breath, it all has to end." Anderchain swung her sword horizontally along the ground. With lightning speed, the two of them didn't even have time to react. Next, Anderchain had already lunged in front of them. When her sword struck, blood sprayed from both of them instantly. But Anderchain didn't stop. She charged straight at Oyun, the third-year student, at 180 miles per hour. But as she closed in, Oyun's weapon suddenly appeared before her. When did he do that? Anderchain quickly parried with her sword. But Oyun's strength was too much, and Oshani coughed up blood instantly as her body was sent flying dozens of yards. "Oyun, you think a trick? This petty could beat me, how pathetic. Anderchain, you're smart. You know that no matter how hard you try, you can't beat me. It's amusing to watch you struggle, but it's over." Watching from the shadows. Lonan wasn't surprised by the outcome. He had always thought that Anderchain shouldn't have participated. But looking back at the strategy she had used in the fight, it was enough to prove her talent. She had fully utilized the environment to create distractions for her opponents using quick and decisive strikes, proof of an incredible strategic mind. However, when faced with absolute power, even the best combat strategy is useless. "I'm sure of it. The exam is over, Great Commander. Don't suffer here anymore. Anderchain isn't seriously hurt. She'll be reasonable and withdraw on her own." Lonan slowly stood up to leave. But in the next second, the sound of a sword being swung stopped him in his tracks again. Anderchain launched another attack, and even Oyun was caught off guard by her move. Oyun said, "What are you doing now? Do you really want to end up severely injured?" Anderchain replied, "Of course, Oyun, the exam isn't over and neither am I." In the following second, Anderchain was leaping swiftly behind him. Anderchain swung her sword down precisely and decisively at Oyun, but he blocked it. However, Oyun's face was cut, leaving a superficial wound. Oyun's expression immediately turned extremely sour. Angrily, Oyun said, "You're asking for trouble." And then he slashed at Anderchain without mercy. Anderchain was blown away by the blow. "Oyun-di, this makes me look like a fool in front of a brainless student. I wonder who's backing you from the shadows, pushing you to do such stupid things. I've always been curious about your past and your capabilities. You have no talent like that new student. Why are you trying so hard? Don't you know better than anyone that everyone thinks you're a lost cause? Why do you persist?" Upon hearing Oyun's question, Anderchain's thoughts were pulled back to her childhood. She was the only survivor in her village because of the war. A man embraced her, weeping his heart out. In that moment, she seemed to find the path she would follow in the future. Anderchain spoke firmly in a low voice, "Because I must become the Grand Commander at all costs." Hearing this, Oyun said mockingly, "What Grand Commander? What kind of nonsense are you spewing?" Anderchain said, "Because no one else can achieve this dream for me." Lonan was shocked by her answer. Anderchain continued, "But I believe in my destiny." "You will never understand," Oyun said. "Get real, talking about dreams when you don't even know your place. I don't want to hear your nonsense anymore." Oyun gathered his strength for a final blow against Anderchain. Suddenly, a loud noise rang out as Oyun's weapon snapped cleanly in half. Lonan appeared right in front of Anderchain. Lonan said, "I didn't want to step in, but that's enough." Senior Oyun looked stunned. Before he could even react, he had already taken a hit from Lonan's sword. Though angry and stubborn, Oyun was powerless. Anderchain stared at Lonan in confusion, whispering his name. "Lonan?" Lonan asked, "Are you all right?" Anderchain replied, "Yeah, thanks for the save, but why are you here?" Lonan said, "Let's skip these trivial details. I want to ask you something. Why do you want to be the Grand Commander?" Anderchain said, "You want to know why I want to become the Grand Commander?" "Why the sudden question?" Lonan nodded firmly and said, "It's important, so please just tell me." Seeing the serious look on Lonan's face, Anderchain stayed silent for a moment. Then she sadly lowered her head and said, "Do you know about the Night of the Evil Wolves?" Lonan said, "You mean the werewolf invasion from 10 years ago?" Anderchain said, "Yes, that war between the Empire and the werewolves. The Empire wanted to expand its territory to the north, and the wolves wanted to stop them. That was the night I lost my family. It was during dinner. My mother and brother got orders from the front. That was the last time I saw my mother. She was so kind. and sweet. I hadn't even finished talking to her. Before she left, she didn't even get to eat her dinner. Then, based on the commander's strategy, the village soldiers were sent straight to defend the castle. They ended up being torn to shreds by powerful werewolves. They were basically sent to their deaths, without any real strategy. Worth mentioning, without knowing the massive power gap, having no real plan, led to a total tragedy. Lonen, you should know that shortly after that, the Empire and the werewolves negotiated a ceasefire. In the end, the Empire agreed to hand over lands to the werewolves, who then joined their army. While my village was destroyed and my family sacrificed, all I got was a useless tombstone. Even though they died nobly for the Empire, I just couldn't accept it. Seeing disabled warriors asking why they had to die, bitter laugh. I immediately felt an immense rage because none of them should have died. If peaceful negotiations had happened from the start, if we had known how to use the terrain to our advantage, if a great Grand Commander had been there. With a tight throat, she said, I can't stand this reality. I want to become the Grand Commander myself, so that there are no more useless sacrifices. I will become the perfect commander, and then no one will ever have to build graves for those who should have lived. After hearing Andochain's passionate dream, Lonen just stared at her, in silence, creating an awkward atmosphere. Then Lonen said, sorry for bringing up bad memories, but that helped me realize something. Andochain asked, realize something? Lonen didn't answer but fell into deep thought. It seemed impossible to make her give up now, but that meant he couldn't just be a bystander anymore, watching her get herself killed. He couldn't bear that pain again. As they were lost in thought, a cold wind rose from the nearby forest. It was a massive storm. Lonen said, looks like he's here. Running out of time, I'll be blunt. Do you know about shadow magic? Andochain said, shadow magic. What's that? Lonen said. The conditions to awaken it are tricky, but once met, you'll get stronger fast. I know someone who's just like you. I think you can use it. I'll help you awaken it later, okay? Andochain said, wait, why are you saying this all of a sudden? Lonen grabbed Andochain's shoulder with one hand, smiling at her. Don't worry. I've got your back. Let's work hard together. Andochain was moved. Lonen really took it to heart. Emotions overwhelmed her, but the very next second, Lonen suddenly pushed Andochain off the cliff. Andochain looked completely bewildered. Lonen said, that's enough for today. Third place isn't bad. I'll come see you as soon as I'm back. Watching Andochain teleport away. Lonen felt relieved. Lonen said, now it's just down to us. A person slowly approached. It was Redefine. Lonen gave him a challenging look and said, why are you everywhere? Looks like you've taken out every opponent in your path. Redefine replied, yes, it's just you and me left on this island. No need for more talk. Let's settle this. Both quickly drew their swords. Give it your all. Let's see who's the goat of the academy. The next second, the two silhouettes turned into streaks of lightning, charging at each other. The strongest beasts in the school. Meanwhile, Andochain, having been teleported, lay quietly in the academy square. She soon regained consciousness, her body unharmed. Andochain realized she had been eliminated and sent back. Remembering what Lonen had said before pushing her, you're already in third place, that meant the other two were those guys. The people around her had gathered in front of the giant screen. The screen was broadcasting the duel between Lonen and Redefine. A powerful sword aura was blocking a massive storm. Once the dust settled, two silhouettes stood firm, facing the mighty storm sword. Lonen changed his strategy, dodging its edge, but Redefine pursued him relentlessly. As he gave chase, he once again imbued his sword with even more powerful storm magic, then swung it down mercilessly at Lonen. At that very moment, two enormous storms appeared behind Lonen. This madman had actually split the storm sword in two to deploy them. A single hit would be fatal, but its power was spread thin. The next second, Lonen charged toward the storm at 180 miles per hour. Swinging his sword down on the two storms, his sword style was exactly Naburos's technique. The two storms were sliced by a small vertical slit, and the power of the gale had leveled the rocks on both sides. I still can't break through it. If he pushes his storm power to the max, I might not win. What's up with this guy? Compared to when we captured, Dalen, his storm sword is much more refined. Before, his speed was way below mine, but now it's almost equal. This beast is stronger than he was during the same period before I crossed over. Redefine was also surprised by Lonen's performance, even though I haven't unleashed the full power of the storm sword he chose. To block it head-on to cut through the magic power. Not to mention he has such perfect mastery of the coach's sword technique. Even if I'm better technically, I've hit my limit in speed. I need to end this fast. Lonen knew that with the way Redefine was growing once his combat style was mastered, he wouldn't be able to win anymore. He couldn't drag this out any longer. Both gripped their sword hilts tight. The next instant, Zulefine suddenly signaled with his eyes. Both his and Lonen's silhouettes vanished from their spots instantly. Only flashes of their spirits were visible in the air. As soon as they landed, Lonen bounced back, charging toward Zulefine at full tilt. Seeing this, Zulefine concentrated several storms into his sword. When he struck, Lonen, a massive, long-reaching storm formed. Lonen broke into a cold sweat as he disappeared into the tempest. Once the smoke cleared, the ground was left with a huge storm scar, but Zulefine knew that Lonen hadn't been defeated. So you have no other choice but to dodge the storm sword using that window to set up a futile ambush. Before he could even finish talking, Zulefine's body was covered in sword wounds. Blood sprayed before he could even react. Lonen was already behind him. But Zulefine smiled slightly and said,
You always surprise me.
Lonen said, You can still smile after being wounded. Then two flashes of swords streaked out. In the midst of light and shadow, both were struck by each other's swords at the same time. Blood sprayed instantly, but in the next second, the two withdrew their blades, launching even more ferocious attacks again. Their sword energy surged, as if to engulf the ground surrounding their sharp blades. Their eyes met for a moment, then they laughed coldly. The stunning duel between them kept the students tense. My God, is this really a freshman duel? To be honest, these monsters should be tested separately. And the geographic environment doesn't affect their performance at all. Not far away, Anderson couldn't help but worry about Lonen. Naburo smiled. A captivating duel. They've both leveled up a lot since school started. But they've hit their physical limit. Whether they like it or not, the next blow will decide the outcome of the match. Under the shimmering blades, their bodies were already riddled with wounds. Zulefine thought, This is exhilarating. Coming to Philippe was the best decision I ever made. To encounter an opponent like you. It's time to end this duel, Lonen said. Yeah, let's decide the winner. If we keep fighting like this, I'm afraid I'll fall in love with an opponent like you. As soon as he finished speaking, the two quickly leaped apart. Upon landing, Zulefine concentrated and quickly channeled magic, saying, I won't hold back, so show all your strength too. Torrents of magic swirled around Zulefine at the center. Seeing this, Lonen called him a madman. Lonen said, I really needed to get you on our team, but before that, I must make you submit through battle. Lonen's gaze locked firmly onto his opponent, lowering his head to channel power into an attack stance. In the next second, Lonen vanished from the spot at extreme speed. Zulefine only saw a flash of sword light. Lonen had already leaped behind him. Zulefine was stunned. Impossible. He's injured, yet he's even faster now. Shocked, he turned around. Lonen attacked. Again, dozens of sword shadows forming a heavenly net. Zulefine smiled bitterly. Now I don't have the energy to keep up with his speed, but if he's going this fast, the strain on his body must be insane. Hasn't he thought about the consequences? Thinking that, Zulefine gripped his sword tightly, frantically driving it into the ground, completely ignoring Lonen's attack. When the sword pierced the earth, it unleashed a massive burst of energy. Lonen immediately swung his sword to block. What a psycho. I thought I'd win with my speed. I didn't expect him to release a magic blade right in front of him. His wounds are preventing him from controlling his magic precisely, so he's bound to be hurt by his own attack too. Does he want to win that badly? But me too. I'm done. Running. We're both at our limit. We can't stall any longer. I have to close in on him now. At that moment, Lonen plunged like a madman, dealing Zulefine a decisive lightning-fast strike. But Zulefine laughed coldly, saying, I knew you'd do that. You've met my expectations. Then intense storms crashed down upon Zulefine's sword. Lonen flinched. I've put everything I have into this. With Zulefine at the center, Bevrel, storms quickly merged to form a massive storm sword vortex. The next second, lightning struck from the sky. Then the sword's momentum became as ferocious as a rainstorm, forming a devastating gale that swept the area in an instant. The earth trembled and the mountains shook. The blade's energy, like a downpour, falling from the heavens, bombarded Lonen. Once the smoke cleared, both were covered in dozens of sword wounds, blood spraying immediately. But Lonen was still standing. He immediately leaped into the air. Crazy bastard! If you want to die, don't drag me with you. If you want to die, don't drag me into it. He didn't even care that the havoc of his storm sword was enough to threaten his own life. When it comes to swordsmanship, he's truly a maniac. That's you for you, Zulefine. I also think that coming to Philippe was my best decision. But in a duel between us, you would definitely lose. Barely after Zulefine finished speaking, after lifting the first taboo, Lonen infused some magic into the hilt and then launched one final attack against Zulefine. Zulefine struggled to grasp his sword. This tense moment left all the spectators stunned. Finally, the match was coming to an end. At that moment, they drew on their last bit of strength, fighting with every ounce of energy left. Zulafine fought desperately. Their clash triggered a massive explosion. Once the smoke cleared, the two were still standing. Both bodies were covered in wounds. Zulafine slowly said nothing more. As soon as he finished speaking, Zulafine slowly collapsed. Lonan said, "You went down first, so I win." But before Lonan could even finish, he also slowly collapsed. After their fall, neither of them got back up. All the spectators held, their breath, their hearts, pounding with excitement. The next second, cheers erupted across the whole square. When Lonan opened his eyes, he found himself lying in the infirmary. Endochain said, "You're awake, Lonan." Lonan asked, "Is the exam over?" Naburo said, "Yes, the exam is over.
You two really risked
Your lives for this duel. You even destroyed the island. But it was truly a magnificent battle. You woke up before him, so at least you're tougher than him in terms of stamina." Lonan said, "That means I beat that bastard." While Lonan was feeling smug, Naburos said, "No, because you both got teleported out at the same time, so it's a draw." Lonan was stunned for a moment. "Well, if that's how it is, nothing can be done." Lonan's response surprised Naburos. She said, "Your reaction is better than expected. I thought you'd throw a fit, rejecting such an ambiguous result." Lonan proudly touched his head and said, "So that's how you see me. The outcome of this duel is fair and reasonable. Besides, Zulafine is way stronger than I anticipated. Obviously, I'll have to train harder from now on. Next time, I'm definitely going to win." At Lonan's words, Naburos nodded her head in satisfaction. His abilities have matured just like his mindset. Yeah, no need to argue. This was clearly a good experience for both of you, especially for you, Lonan, because you finally managed to use that magic you wanted so badly. Wait, what? Hold on, what did you just say? I can use magic, Naburos said. Your last move. Wasn't it infused with magic? A true combination of sword and sorcery. Lonan looked at his hands, recalling that moment. He had indeed felt something different back then. So that's it. Naburos said, "Yes, that's what we call sword aura, when you can use magic. Compared to the internal energy you were faking before, its depth is on a whole different level. But judging by your reaction, you haven't mastered its use yet, so you need to act fast. Because unlike the other students, we don't know when. Your physical condition might impose new limits. Andishan take Lonan to see that good-for-nothing. Tomorrow at dawn, good-for-nothing. Are you talking about Professor Jordan?" The scene shifts to the main square of the academy. Lonan and Andashan are on their way to see Professor Jordan. Lonan said since Professor Naburos recommended him, he must be really strong. Andashan said he's considered a magic master. That's why other professors often ask for his help. One time a student lost control of their magic, and Professor Jordan fixed it effortlessly. Lonan said, "Sounds impressive, but why does Coach Naburos seem to dislike him?" Andashan said. "Probably because they have different personalities. You'll understand when you see him. But the professor is pretty unique." Lonan stayed quiet after that. Then he smiled slightly and thought, "It doesn't matter to me. What matters is that he can help me use magic, and since he's so skilled, he should know the Grand Commander's magic." Before crossing over, I didn't learn much about his shadow magic. Seeing Lonan silent, Andashan asked, "I heard you met Zulafine before coming here. Did he accept your proposal?" Lonan said smugly, "Of course he accepted. That guy would never turn me down." It turns out that after being released, Lonan had planned to meet Zulafine. Zulafine said, "Looks like we're on the same page. I can't accept this result either." After saying that, he unsheathed his sword with fighting spirit and said, "Let's settle this once and for all." But Lonan said coolly, "I don't like this result any more than you do, but I called you here for another reason." Zulafine said, "Another reason?" Before Zulafine could react, Lonan immediately pulled out a piece of paper and said, "Join my club." Zulafine said, exasperated, "What? That's the reason? You want me to join the club of the guy who beat me? What nonsense, I refuse. If you keep talking garbage, I'm leaving." Lonan went quiet, but then he immediately gave a mischievous grin and said, "The club members are planning a fun housewarming party, and it just so happens that my sister Ellie is moving in too." When Zulafine heard that name, he got as hyped as if he'd just been injected with adrenaline. He said, "What did you just say Ellie is moving there? Tell me more details. Is it a safe place? Have you arranged guards for her?" Seeing Zulafine so anxious, Lonan refused to tell him. Lonan said, "I'm not telling." "Why should I tell someone who isn't in my club? If you join, Before he could finish, Zulafine cut him off with a gesture. Zulafine said, "The name is already signed. Do I meet the criteria now? I hope you can explain everything to me clearly." Thinking back to Zulafine yesterday, Lonan was both stunned and worried at the thought that he would one day become the Lord of Grandia. Suddenly, Andashan stopped walking, looked up and said, All right, we're here. This is where Professor Jordan lives. Tower 41. Looking at this strange Castle, Lonan couldn't help but be surprised. This place looks really weird. Suddenly, a voice rang out behind them. Hey, you the sword-swinging punk? Professor Jordan, said Andashan. Professor, since Lonan has always struggled to use magic coach. Nabaros told us to find you. Jordan said she sent you here. Just because you can't use magic, you must be a very promising student. What do you think, Lonan? Lonan said, yeah, nice to meet. Before Lonan could finish, Jordan interrupted him. How much did you prepare? I don't do charity. Work outside of office hours must be paid for. After saying that, he held out his hand to Lonan. So, I know you must have the cash ready, right? Lonan said in shock. You want money right now, Jordan? Said, yep. And by the way, it's at least 10 gold coins an hour. Lonan thought. He was joking, but seeing his serious expression, he was 100% certain that he really wanted the money. Lonan said, I don't have any money, no other way. Jordan said, then go make some and come back. As Lonan was about to leave, Jordan sensed a familiar magic emanating from Lonan. He stopped dead and said, there is one way. Come here, I'll offer you a deal. Lonan was stunned. This guy is seriously creepy. What he didn't know was that the magical power of Saranth's ring had drawn him in. When Lonan said it came from Saranth, Jordan let them in. Lonan looked around his house, which was barely furnished, and couldn't help but wonder if this was really the home of a well-paid professor. At the same time, he noticed that once the door was closed, he couldn't hear a single thing from outside, thanks to the numerous magical devices on the door. If he weren't a professor, you'd suspect him of being a perverted serial killer. While Lonan scanned his surroundings, Jordan asked, Can I see that object? Lonan handed him the ring and said, It's a precious item, so be careful, Jordan said. Don't worry, it's precious to me too, Jordan said. I can feel its magic is extremely pure, which must mean it has spent at least 2,000 years mastering all elemental magic. Lonan was shocked. He could tell all that. Jordan said, My condition is simple. Please, allow me to extract a little magic from the magic ring. Lonan asked. Extract magic, Jordan said. Yes, I've been working on an experiment for a long time, and I need the magic of a species that has lived and mastered magic for ages. It seems you have a good relationship with him for him to give you such a precious gift. Lonan thought back to his moments with Saranth. Lonan said, Yes, if you agree, I promise to help you with everything I've got. While that sounds good, I have another condition. Help solve Andashan's problem too, seeing Lonan haggling, Jordan said with annoyance. The magical power I need is very small, and yet you add another condition. Lonan said, If you don't want to, too bad, we can just leave. Jordan said, That's too much, I didn't say that. Finally, Jordan accepted the request from Lonan. Jordan said, You actually have a talent for negotiation. Lonan said, Thanks for the compliment. Jordan said, If that jerk introduced you, then the matter must be urgent. He then pointed to a magic circle and said, Please stand on top of it. After Lonan stood there, Jordan began to cast a spell to examine him. He said, It looks like you haven't regained your magic sense for a long time. There's almost no trace of magic in you, which means you've never used it before. Lonan said, Yeah, I can only see it now, but I've never used it. Someone cursed me, Jordan said. This is no ordinary curse. The source of this magical power comes from... It's opened slightly and is now trying to close again. I'm going to guide my magic to force it open. You'll feel a sharp pain like a knife slicing through your spine, but you can handle it right. Lonan said, What are you? The very next second, screams of pain echoed through the room. Oh my God, what the hell is this? Andashan was also terrified and didn't know what to do. As Jordan cast his spell, his consciousness slowly penetrated Lonan's magic source, opening up his power source bit by bit. Jordan said, The resistance is lower than expected. It's opening up well. If it keeps going like this, I think it'll be over quickly. Suddenly, a massive surge of red and black magic attacked. Jordan couldn't help but tremble. Torrents of red and black magic enveloped him. Looking up, he saw a pair of murderous eyes staring at him. What is that? How can such a thing be inside him? The next instant, his consciousness inside Lonan's body was completely incinerated. Back in reality, he stopped casting, but the red and black magic tried to swallow him up. Jordan immediately cast a spell to repel it. As a result, he was thrown dozens of meters back. Then he spat out a mouthful of fresh blood, but the bleeding wouldn't stop. Not only did the bleeding increase dramatically, but his body was also convulsing. Lonan and Andashan rushed over to support him. Jordan immediately recited a spell, Open. As soon as the words were spoken, the magic circle on the floor glowed. Lonan remembered that this magic was very similar to the one Elizabeth had cast before. The next second, a giant mouth swallowed them up as it closed. Secret sensed something unusual in the office. Jordan suddenly opened the door. What happened to him? By then, Lonan and the others were already in front of them, seeing Jordan continuously vomiting blood. Secret, ignoring the greetings, immediately went to check on his condition. Jordan kept coughing up blood. Lonan was close to him, which made Secret wonder if it was linked to his curse. Secret said, Lonan, did Jordan channel his magic into your body? Lonan replied, yes, he said he could open the magic source, sealed inside my body. Secret said, I see. I believe part of the curse in your body might have been transferred to Jordan. It's an extremely evil curse that no one but you can easily handle. Seeing Jordan's uncontrollable bleeding, Secret broke into a cold sweat. At this rate, Jordan's going to die, Lonan said awkwardly. You're saying, Professor, Jordan is going to die because of my curse, Secret said. I mean, if he doesn't get treated soon, it could happen. Fortunately, the magic hasn't taken root yet. Lonan, get ready for a fight. Lonan eagerly grabbed his sword and said, so we're lifting the curse now. Secret didn't answer but focused on a spell. The very next second, a multi-eyed monster flew out of Jordan's body. Secret grabbed it and quickly tossed it to Lonan. Lonan swiftly drew his sword. With only the sound of the blade leaving the scabbard, the monster was already riddled with sword strikes. When Lonan sheathed his sword, its body was completely sliced up. It turned into dust. Andashan hurried to check Jordan's wounds. Jordan said, thanks, Secret, you saved my life. Secret said, that's because you were too quick to judge. I already told you about a student with an extremely severe curse, something never seen before. Jordan said, damn, that monster was the curse. After dealing with the monster, Lonan immediately ran over to Jordan to check on him. Professor Jordan, are you okay now? Jordan said, yes, thanks. I just had a new experience. It's the first time I've seen such a ridiculous curse. Your life must be really messed up. Anyway, I kept my promise. Lonan looked on in disbelief. Jordan said, Secret, can you check Lonan's status? Then Secret glanced at Lonan. How is this possible? Magic is flowing through Lonan's body. I really can't believe it. Even though it's weak, the magic circuits are active. Lonan, did you have the curse lifted recently, or did you run into some cursed phony god? Lonan said, no, nothing like that. Secret said, for some unknown reason, the curse blocking your magic circuits has weakened. Right now, a strange power is eroding the curse like wind and rain wearing down a massive boulder. Of course, your curse is still trying to close your magic circuits, but thanks to this unknown power and Jordan widening your magic channels, it won't be easy to shut them again. After hearing this, Lonan said excitedly, does that mean I can use magic now? Secret replied, yes, but to use it freely, it will still take some time. If you train every day, you'll be an expert in 20 years. Hearing 20 years, Lonan was discouraged. Lonan said, what are you talking about, 20 years? How could I wait that long? Secret said, you have to overcome it through individual training. And this is a method of treatment that won't put your life at risk. At that moment, Jordan stood up and said, there is a way to shorten the time. It depends on your effort and determination. If you use the magic practice method that I invented. A few moments later, Jordan was preparing to cast a new spell to continue opening Lonan's magic source. Jordan said, Lonan, your current magical power is very limited. The magic circuits you just opened are much narrower than those of your peers. But if you learn this practice and widen your circuits in the future, you can greatly increase your magical power. It also depends on your abilities. In about 5 years, you should be able to use magic normally. Hearing 5 years, Lonan was still slightly unsatisfied. Jordan said, I'll guide my magics to help you feel the flow of your own magic channels. Even though it's risky, it's only possible when the curse is temporarily weakened. Lonan said, thank you, Professor. Jordan then said, let's begin. As soon as the words were spoken, a chilling pain instantly exploded throughout Lonan's body. What sets this method apart from the others is that you must adjust your speed and direction and manage it to the extreme. Lonan listened while enduring the pain, and he said, don't rush it. Guide the magic with the utmost care, Jordan said. Your weak channels, suppressed for so long, are likely near the breaking point. In the future, you'll need to use magic power to mend them. Follow the path traced by my magic, and it will become your strength. Do you understand what I'm saying? Lonan said, yes, I understand. I'll try it myself. As soon as he said that, surges of red magic began accumulating around Lonan. He memorized it. After I only guided him once, no way. Is his comprehension and control really this cracked? Haha, no wonder that bastard saw his talent. He's definitely built different. It's a good thing you learned so fast. I won't touch this curse again. If you have the time, repeat this once a day. After Lonan's energy passed through the magic, channels a trace of red magic appeared in his palm. He said, "Is this my magic power? I finally made a breakthrough. I'm changing. I'm constantly evolving compared to my past self. Back then, I couldn't even imagine possessing any magical power. This is enough for now. Thank you so much, Professor. I finally understand why your fees are so steep." While Lonan was rejoicing, awakened, Jordan collapsed again. Lonan cried out, "Professor!" But he struggled to get up and grabbed Lonan's hand. "Lonan, I've solved your problem, so keep your promise too." Lonan said, "I understand, but take care of your health first." Jordan said, "My health doesn't matter. What matters is that I have to save someone, even if it costs me my life. I'm ready. So, give me the ring." Lonan frowned in front of Jordan, who was severely injured and seemed to be losing his mind. Secretly, he said, "He's pushing himself too far, always so impulsive and crazy. It seems the research needs this ring. Jordan, my friend, how much longer? Will you live in the chains of the past?" The scene changes. The three of them step onto the magic circle to return to Jordan's castle. "And a Chandy, hurry up!" Lonan shouted, running to the nearest clinic. "We can be there in 5 minutes." As they rushed outside, the main door was locked with heavy padlocks and magical seals on the latches. And Ochandy looked helplessly at the door covered in magic circles. At that moment, a hand reached out from behind. It was Jordan. Murmuring a spell, he pointed to the back and said, "You should go back that way." A few moments later, a door appeared on the wall. Seeing that it was the wrong door, Lonan said, "Professor Jordan, you should take the door with the magic engravings." But Jordan insisted on going down. "I must go down before those roses." Lonan looked at him again with confusion, but finally went inside. Following the dark stairs down, when they reached the basement, the horrific scene before them shocked them both. Dissected goblins, various knives, and a golden-haired beauty surrounded by many flowers. Her eyes were tightly shut as if she had been sleeping for a long time. "So the professor is this desperate because of this woman," said Andochandy. "Based on the current situation, it's likely," said Lonan. Andochandy, look after her for a bit. "I'm going to see if there's anything useful around here." Then Lonan looked around. There were countless strange things, and traces of medical experiments he had clearly performed on the living bodies of monsters. You could tell at a glance that this was no ordinary experiment. Suddenly he discovered a notebook on the table, then glanced at Jordan. "What exactly is Professor Jordan trying to do?" Lona slowly opened the notebook. "I'm almost finished." "Wait just a bit longer, Sonia. Luckily, I've preserved her body before it could rot. As long as it's preserved, I firmly believe I can bring my wife, Sonia, back to life, even though everyone says there is no precedent for a successful resurrection. I will never give up. These are the journals of my struggle to save her. 54th attempt at resurrection. Even the ogre heart from the northern black market didn't work. I'm adjusting the schedule at the Sorcerer's Tower for my experiments, but my absences have reached the limit. 76th resurrection. Because of my absences, the Mage's Tower has fired me without pay. I can no longer run my experiments. With the director's help, I got a professor gig. I moved Sonia to the basement of Tower 41. Starting today, I'm a professor here. I have no choice. It's the only way to make a buck. 81st resurrection attempt. 96th resurrection attempt. 134th resurrection attempt. But my experiments still aren't progressing, Lona. Understood then why he wanted the cash. The materials from the basement weren't easy to get through normal methods, so all this was for love. I've seen people who bet it all on love. They lose their minds over it. Lonine thought of Axolafan. Looks like I have a person like that in my circle. At this point, a red square was attached to the notebook. The notebook noted. The problem is most of these people don't end up well, especially if someone exploits your weakness to get close to you. I think I have to make a deal with the devil. Lona picked up the red square and reflected on this letter. Is she a suspect? Does she come from those demons too? But I can't let. At that moment, Jordan called out to Lonnie from behind. "What are you doing now? You didn't touch my stuff, did you?" Lona looked at him, remained silent for a long time, and said, "No, of course not. I was just looking for something to help you recover, since I can't even use magic yet. I wouldn't understand a thing even if I saw it." In that split second, Lona slipped the red square into his pocket. After heading out, despite his injuries, Jordan took the ring. Shortly after, Jordan handed the ring back to Lona. Lona, confused, looked at the ring. It didn't seem any different. Jordan said, "I told you I'd only extract a tiny portion, especially since the ring's magical power is already substantial. I know you must be a bit shocked. After seeing my experiment, it's a last-ditch effort. Please keep this strictly confidential." Lonine rubbed his head nervously and said, "Of course, I don't want to meddle in other people's business anyway." Seeing that they both agreed, Jordan thanked them quietly. Then he said to Andochan, "We'll deal with your problem another day. There is an unusual magical power within you." Once finished, the two left. Each busy with their own thoughts, Lona returned and looked at the square letter he had managed to snag. Could Professor Jordan be linked to the Nebula organization? Thinking this, Lona slowly opened the letter. He saw only a pool of blood on the paper. Just as Lona hesitated, the bloodstain turned into a mass of fresh flowing blood. Lona watched in disbelief as the blood floated in the air. A second later, that mass of blood suddenly burst, forming a distinct pattern. That's a letter written by a vampire, answered a voice behind him. It was Ophelia. She said, I came here because I sensed the power of blood, but I didn't expect to find you. The two looked at each other. But I didn't expect it to be you. They went back to this club to avoid drawing attention. Lona said, a few days ago you took Zeta for your research. I thought you were busy. Is your research coming along well? Ophelia said, thanks to Zeta, I've made a lot of progress. I taught Zeta blood magic as a form of payment. She actually has way more talent than I hoped for. When you see her, later you're going to be shook. But how did you get a blood letter? Lona asked. Blood letter? You mean this paper? Ophelia explained patiently. The so-called blood letter is one of the basics of blood magic. It can compress info into a single drop of blood. That's why vampires use it to communicate. If you pump some magic into it, you can see the hidden message. The message in the blood letter. For the blood essence, come to me, Bloodhuck. The blood essence is an ingredient for the experiment in the professor's journal. So these demons aren't those Nebula scumbags, Ophelia said, so it's Bloodhuck. So that's the organization behind this. Lona asked, you know them, Ophelia said. Bloodhuck is a new outfit of young vampires under 200 years old. They're just immature kids. They want vampires to get back to their golden age, and they'll pull all kinds of shady moves to get what they want. It's weird that they'd have something rare even among vampires. Blood essence. Can you tell me who received the letter? Lona hesitated and was reluctant to answer. If that person accepted the request, they could end up with a fate worse than death, basically becoming a puppet. After a long silence, Lona said slowly, it's something from Professor Jordan's lab. Upon hearing this, Ophelia gets uneasy and says, you mean that legendary mage who left the mage's tower? Lona said, legendary mage. Is he really that famous? Ophelia said he's famous even among vampires, and is part of the continent's elite, having reached that level. Lona said, so impressive. Then he should be able to easily defeat Bloodhuck and take the blood essence, right? Ophelia said indeed he could, but if he wants the blood essence, then the situation is different. It's something formed by a magical fusion, inherent to vampires. They've been practicing blood magic for a long time. It can concentrate blood energy, which gives it incredible effects. But if the owner of the essence isn't a vampire using blood magic to activate it, it's just a useless redstone. In other words, it's impossible to get the blood essence without their cooperation. Lona said, then the professor has no choice but to accept their demands. Ophelia said, yes. I can probably guess their conditions. Lona didn't want Jordan in danger, and at that moment an idea came to him. A moment later, Ophelia handed a bottle of green solution to Lona. She said, I've made the transformation potion you asked for. With this, you can maintain Professor Jordan's appearance for at least 30 minutes. It doesn't last long, but the effect is reliable and can trick the eyes of Bloodhuck. Lona said, though the time is short, thank you, Ophelia. She said, even though they might still be young, they're at least century-old vampires. I still think it would be safer for me to go with you. Lona refused her immediately. No need. If you get into a conflict with your own kind over this, it could put you in a difficult spot. Don't worry, I won't get hurt. As for whether they will be, that's another story. At midnight, 4 men were guarding the entrance of a cave. At the same moment, a silhouette stepped forward. The candidate for blood slave mentioned by the boss has arrived. His name is Jordan, a great mage, but I don't feel his magic. Don't lower your guard. He faced the holy swordsman. Nibiru head on. Hello, are you Jordan? Yeah, but I don't see your master. He's waiting inside. Take off your hood first. We need to verify your identity. Lona, in disguise, stared him down. For a few seconds, then slowly took off the hat and said, is this good enough? Yes. Thank you for your cooperation, Sir Jordan. I'll guide you. At that moment, the dark-haired man stared at Lonnie's sword. Isn't he a mage? Why? Is he carrying a long sword? But before he could think further, Lonnie approached and said, do you have a death wish?